It all kicks off by telling us that on the day the MC was born, it was insanely windy. Right in his childhood, little Simon used to hang out with this glowing little bird, a tiny creature his mom called the blessing of the wind spirit. While playing near their wooden house, the kid asks the spirit to cool him down a bit. Meanwhile, a guy and a lady were sweating it out, training intensely with swords right there in the backyard. Noticing the unusual breeze, the warrior stops everything and asks if the kid just pulled that off, dropping the fact that this kind of spiritual magic talent is absolutely wild and something he'd only ever seen at the royal palace. Hearing that massive flex, the mom looks at the kid, just bursting with pride. The guy then gets all hyped, saying that if the boy becomes a royal court mage, his dad is going to be over the moon. But as time goes by, our boy ends up facing a reality that's way heavier and darker than he ever signed up for. A terrible trail of destruction and defeated folks marks the path he was basically forced to walk. A massive target was painted on his back, attracting crazy enemies he could barely handle. But only after putting up with all that ridiculous burden. Standing right in the middle of that whole scene of loss, he looks down and asks himself if he finally managed to find an answer. The conclusion he reaches is that he needs to put a permanent stop to the guy who put a bounty on his head in the first place. With a fierce gleam of determination in his eyes, he gets that this is the only way to break out of this cursed loop. Right then, the scene cuts to a heavy storm where a dam just gives out, dragging a desperate guy who's begging for help in the water. In this world, magic is a super common thing, proved by two hooded dudes prepping spells under the pouring rain. It basically works like the art of borrowing power using mana, but the situation there is critical, and a local begs the master mage to hurry up before the water washes everything away. In a flash, complex magic circles pop up in the air. A gigantic purple barrier appears to hold back the current, showing exactly why these guys get to call themselves mages. Except the caster just drops his hands and announces his shift is over, completely ignoring the villager freaking out about the people still stuck in the water. Looking visibly annoyed, the mage throws it in his face that the original gig was just to reinforce the dam and absolutely nothing else. Unbelieving, the local claps back, asking what he was supposed to do since the whole thing collapsed before they even got there. Making a money sign with his fingers, the hooded guy makes it crystal clear that he charges per spell, demanding extra cash if they want any more rescue action. The village leader is just left completely shook by how ice cold this dude is. While they're bickering down in the violent current, some poor guy is clinging to a piece of wood just to avoid going under for good. A bunch of heavy debris comes rushing down the water looking super threatening. Just when the guy is about to get wiped out by a massive log, the narrator chimes in to explain that there's a super elite and rare group among magic users. Out of nowhere, a crazy gale sweeps in and pushes the danger away, leaving the locals totally mind-blown by the scene. Even the sellout mage steps back in shock when he notices the sudden entrance of a wind spirit. The colossal windstorm takes over the area, bossing the water flow around with scary ease. That same villager who was about to sink is now chilling in a safe zone, looking totally confused about what just went down. A gigantic greenish cyclone stabilizes the flood's mess, showing off the true scale of what they call spiritual magic. Calm footsteps echo through the rain, followed by a voice smoothly stating that he's not taking any new gigs right now. A mysterious young dude in a hood walks right past the mercenary mages, letting them know that since he was in the neighborhood, he'd just handle the mess himself. The greedy caster just watches the rookie take over the situation without uttering a single word. Paying close attention, the village leader stares in awe at the little blue bird chilling on the newcomer's shoulder. Seeing the guy stabilize that entire storm like it was child's play, the villager can't even process who he's looking at. The story then jumps to a peaceful night in the Kingdom of Terrace, in a tiny spot called Ratville. A squad of locals is walking the streets with torches, bummed out that they haven't found what they were looking for. A woman is crying her eyes out while a guy comforts her, stating that it's been yet another wasted day of searching. The team leader grumbles in frustration, having zero clue where their target could have vanished to. That's when an outsider pops up right behind him, politely asking if there's an inn anywhere around there. Turning to the kid, the local apologizes and explains that a tragedy hit the village, suggesting he go find a place to crash in the next town over. Curious about the heavy vibes, the traveler insists on knowing what the deal is. Adjusting his hood, he casually drops that he couldn't help but notice the whole group frantically looking for something. With the blue bird stealing the spotlight on his shoulder, the guy suggests he might actually be a huge help to the village. Whipping off his cape in a super dramatic move, he introduces himself bursting with confidence, claiming to be the famous Wind May. The locals, however, just look at each other totally lost, whispering the title without really getting what the hype is about. The group leader awkwardly thanks him for the good vibes but shoots down the offer, figuring the kid wouldn't be of much use. Completely embarrassed by the unprovoked rejection, the outsider facepalms and asks if they even know what a mage is. The villager gets defensive, saying he's heard rumors that they're a dangerous folks, making the guy realize just how out of the loop these people are. To prove his point, he focuses his energy and whips up a sparkling light right in the palm of his hand. The sparks float up into the night sky, leaving everyone mesmerized, while he explains that mages hold a level of power most can't even touch. He goes on to say there are individuals who can move boulders the size of houses, change the flow of rivers, and save people who are literally knocking on heaven's door. Magic is the ultimate tool to pull off stuff that raw human muscle could never manage alone. Among the mystic arts, spiritual magic taps directly into the forces of nature and is mastered by a very rare few who actually get it. Pointing at himself with total swagger, he guarantees there isn't a spot in the world where a wind spirit can't sneak into to investigate. Offering his services one more time, he hits a wall of suspicion from the leader, who thinks it's super sketchy for someone that awesome to just randomly want to help regular folks. The MC gets a massive reality check, honestly offended that these people have legitimately never heard of his legendary rep. Trying to save face, he starts name-dropping the greats of history, bringing up the legendary mage who shielded the entire kingdom back in the day. He also makes sure to hype up the holy saint loved by the divine, famous for her epic deeds. Another mythical figure that gets tossed into the mix is the dreaded guardian of the mages. And finally, with maximum energy, he praises the guy who fixes everyone's problems, the one and only Wind May. With his eyes sparkling with hope, he asks if anyone there knows the rumors about the mercenary with the blue bird, and the local stutters a hesitant yes. Striking a totally extra pose, the kid fakes being humble, saying it's awkward to hype himself up, claiming the identity right before the guy can even ask if he's actually going to help. Raising a gloved hand, he reminds everyone that he rocks the title of mage, but totally operates as a mercenary. Rubbing his fingers together in the universal sign for cash, the young guy lets them know that, for a reasonable fee of sincerity, the village's problem will become his problem. Without much of a choice, the villagers huddle up, agreeing to scrape together every last coin they have to pay the rush fee. While the deal goes down, a mysterious hooded figure watches the whole thing from a distance, completely silent. Later on, the night goes quietly around a little wooden cabin the village let him use. Inside, the so-called hero locks his bird in a cage while letting out a few shady, villainous chuckles. Holding a heavy bag packed with coins, he celebrates the easy payday, realizing those locals were seriously desperate. The bedroom window slides open without a sound right in the dead of night. Hopping out with the cage in hand, the scammer sneaks away, laughing at how clueless country folks are, making his hustle a walk in the park. Strolling away into the shadows, he kind of feels a tiny bit bad for them, but cynically decides the villagers shouldn't have been so gullible. Without getting very far, the fraud gets stopped in his tracks by a voice telling him to freeze right there. Stepping out of the shadows, Simon asks what's the rush, wondering if he really planned to just ditch the village's request like that. Turning around, the con artist recognizes the cape and asks if he's that traveler who bumped into the group earlier. With a super arrogant tone, he tells the kid to mind his own business and get lost, saying hell let it slide this time because he's in a good mood. The MC calmly lets him know that's a no-go, demanding he return the cash he swindled from the villagers since he clearly never planned on doing the job. Pulling a magic item out of his pocket, the scammer wants to know if the outsider has some kind of backup, or if he just looked like an easy mark. Deciding not to waste any more time, he warns that he's in a hurry and wants to wrap this up fast, forming a small glowing circle in his hand. Yelling out his spell's name, intense purple energy starts taking shape around him, turning into sharp blades. Feeling himself way too much, he drops some free advice, claiming that the dumbest thing someone can do is mess with a mage. Prepping his attack, the fraud confidently declares hell be the last caster the kid ever faces. The purple blades shoot violently at the target, but Simon just raises a hand and easily swats them all away using wind magic. Watching the technique, the MC realizes the guy actually knows how to use magic and can't wrap his head around why he's out here running cheap scams. Absolutely shook by what he just saw, the scammer steps back, asking how the heck his opponent deflected the attack like that. Right then, the dark-haired kid points out that the guy used specific pheromones just to attract those glowing bugs from earlier. He realizes the whole light show was just a flex to impress regular people, admitting he's getting massive second-hand embarrassment that they share the same profession. Keeping his cool, the MC adds one more little detail to the story. He points at the cage dropped on the ground, revealing that the little blue critter inside is literally begging for help. With a simple wave of the kid's hands, real spiritual magic starts flooding the dark woods. A massive green vortex takes over the area, proving the insane power gap between the two of them. Super casually, Simon explains that the trapped little animal isn't just some random parrot like the scammer thought. The glowing creature starts growing and shape-shifting, introducing itself as the literal essence of the wind. The tiny bird takes on its true epic form, revealing it's actually the king of spirits, Elk. The scammer goes into full panic mode the second he recognizes the majestic figure, realizing he just picked a fight with the actual Wind May. The spirit roasts the con artist, joking that his cheap knockoff act fits his pathetic vibe perfectly, which leaves the guy completely speechless hearing a bird talk trash. Without losing his chill, the kid says he's down to forgive the whole identity theft thing if the cash gets handed over peacefully. Sweating bullets, the imposter finally pieces together how the kid casts spells without chanting, remembering seeing him on a battlefield once. He recalls that terrifying day when dozens of guys got swept away by one single, absolute powerhouse of a caster. Admitting that kind of power totally lives up to the kid's title, but in that same breath, he remembers that nobody actually lost their lives in that fight. Believing the MC is just way too soft and refuses to end anyone, the scammer starts getting his fake confidence back. Faking a surrender to buy some time, he agrees to hand over the cash looking totally calm, figuring nice guys are easy to catch off guard. He tosses the coin bag back, acting all cooperative, but he's already scheming that if magic won't cut it, he'll just switch to close combat. Simon catches the bag in midair and advises the guy to stop scamming humble folks, suggesting he go find an honest job. But in a sneak attack, the scammer whips out a knife and lunges forward, screaming that he's taking the win in close quarters. Unbothered by the rush, the MC just summons a lesser wind spirit to handle the trash quickly. In one smooth move, he unleashes a heavy blast of air that easily swats the attacker away before the blade even gets close. Taking advantage of the opening, Simon and his spirit prep a spell called Spiral to wrap this mess up. A massive green tornado hits the scammer head-on, launching his body backward with insane force. The impact is brutal, making the guy scream in pain as he gets the exact karma he deserved for trying to pull a literal backstab. Sprawled out on the ground and pretty beat up, he hears the mage calmly let him know it's gonna be a long time before he can cast anything again. Pressing on his wounded arm, the fraud gets a dead serious warning. If he gets caught pulling this kind of stun again, the payback will be way worse. With a dark, intimidating glare, the kid guarantees next time hell aims straight for a vital spot, just like he did to his arm. Terrified by the threat and the mage's overwhelming presence, the scammer lets out a scream of pure panic. Without a second thought, he turns tail and sprints desperately into the dark forest, absolutely terrified of what might happen. Watching the pathetic getaway, the Spirit King sarcastically notes the guy is running like his life depends on it. Elkin calls Simon out, thinking he's way too soft for just trying to scare the guy when he never planned on actually finishing him, but admits the jump scare totally worked. Annoyed by the passive vibe, the spirit asks why he doesn't just deal with the problem permanently, but Simon replies he just can't do that. Staring up at the peaceful night sky, the MC explains that his hustle to help people while working as a merc has a much bigger purpose. He reveals it's all about atoning for his sins for what he's about to do, which is why he doesn't want to add to his karma by taking a life he considers completely useless. A quiet pause settles over the woods as he thinks about his ultimate goal. With eyes full of pure resolve, he promises himself he won't cross that line until he finally puts a permanent end to that one specific man. The next day, the village wakes up to a super chill morning under a bright, calm sun. The heavy bag of coins gets slammed back onto the wooden table, totally shocking the villagers. The village leader listens, completely floored, as he gets told their so-called hired savior from yesterday was nothing but a fraud. Simon casually mentions that, by pure coincidence, he caught the scammer trying to sneak out in the dead of night with all their cash. Handing back the recovered funds, he advises the locals to be way more careful when dealing with random strangers. The villager finally processes what went down, looking pretty embarrassed for falling for such an obvious lie. He admits the guy seemed super sketchy from the jump, but things in the village were so desperate they just clung to any shred of hope. The young mage just listens to him vent in silence, totally getting how heavy that kind of desperation can be. Not wanting to drag the conversation out, he turns around and says he can't be late, getting ready to hit the road. Right before he can walk out the door, one of the village women runs up and asks him to wait a sec. She steps up carefully, explaining they don't have much and losing that money would have completely crushed everyone's hopes. Looking incredibly relieved, she thanks him for being so generous and apologizes for how suspiciously they treated him yesterday. Handing over a little cloth bundle, she offers him some food for the road, feeling bad that it's literally all they can spare right now. The village leader waves from outside, wishing the kid the best of luck on his journey as he slowly walks away. Taken aback by the unexpected kindness, the guy touches his own face, processing the super genuine gratitude from people who have next to nothing. Inside the inn, the villager claps his hands to get everyone's attention, announcing they don't have time to sit around and need to get back to the search. The woman looks a bit lost with the sudden vibe shift, not really sure where to even start looking again. Before anyone can make a move, the sound of heavy boots echoes at the entrance of the hall. With the sunlight at his back and that epic bird on his shoulder, the real wind mage steps back in, bringing some serious main character energy. Looking straight at the locals, the MC changes his mind and asks them to explain exactly what the heck is going on in this place. The village leader, looking exhausted and spooked, reveals that not too long ago a child just vanished. But he adds that things got way worse, because this time, literally every single kid in the village disappeared without a trace. He explains that in the middle of this absolute nightmare, the very first kid who went missing was actually found. Except the outcome was horrific. The little guy was found without a pulse and missing a vital part from his chest. Simon is visibly disturbed by how brutal that is and questions the bizarre detail, only to hear the guy confirm it definitely didn't look like an animal attack. Processing the gruesome story, Simon immediately figures out that the chest wound looked like it was surgically carved out with a blade. In the mage's mind, a dark memory flashes of a crazy dude holding a beating heart while fire consumes everything around him. He relives the moment a ruthless, lightning-fast attack sliced the air right in front of him. Then a painful voice echoes in his memories, cruelly demanding that he do something useful for once in his life. The flashback shows him as a little kid, bawling his eyes out in the middle of all that suffocating destruction. The trauma of his past is scarred by the lunatic stare of the guy who ruined his entire life. The attacker steps forward covered in flames, holding out his hand and demanding they hand over the heart. Snapping back to the present, the village leader vents that this whole insane tragedy is driving everyone crazy, while the kid just listens with his head down. Right behind him, one of the villagers throws out the theory that this nightmare mystery might actually be linked to magic. Surprised by the sudden hot take, the village chief asks what on earth makes him think that. Taking over the conversation, Simon explains that up until a few years ago, there were people who hardcore believed in a super messed up superstition on the continent. He says the rumor claimed that consuming the heart of a young mage would give mystical powers even to a regular person, which kicked off a ruthless witch hunt for those kids. Visibly uncomfortable, the leader instantly fires back, swearing that their village has absolutely zero ties to the magic arts. Channeling a green aura in his hands, the MC clarifies that human mana fades as people grow up, but in kids, it's super easy to check if they have hidden talent. Forming an orb of pure wind, he holds out his arm and asks point-blank what the locals are seeing in the palm of his hand. Everyone crowds around the young outsider in the hall, staring intensely at the glowing light show. Scratching his chin, the chief squints and hesitantly says it just looks like a bluish ball of light that's giving off a tiny breeze. With the little wind spirit Ellie flapping its wings right in the middle of the spell, the guy asks if they really can't see anything inside the light. The villagers are totally lost and ask what exactly they're supposed to be seeing in his magic. Getting the picture, Simon realizes internally that regular folks can't see spiritual forms, wondering to himself if the enemy's targets absolutely had to have mana flowing in them. Right then, the same woman who helped him earlier cuts in, remembering that someone pulled a very similar stunt recently in the village. She mentions that hooded guys from the Church of Ernia went door to door with a weird lantern, asking the locals what they saw in the glow. The mage grabs the woman's shoulders tight and straight up asks if she can remember what any of those visitors looked like. With an intense, urgent stare, he presses her, desperate to know if one of them happened to have a very specific feature. Pulling his own collar over his face, he mimics a mask while trying to confirm if his target was there. The outsider describes the guy's scary vibe and asks if that figure was rolling with the group. The scene cuts to the MC speedwalking through the woods, accompanied only by his spirit partner. He walks in total silence, trying to process the messed up new intel he just got. The woman's frustrating answer echoes in his head, confirming she couldn't see a single face in that group. She explained they all wore heavy hoods and masks, introducing themselves strictly as religious folks on a mission. Her story detailed that this supposed lantern gave off a yellow, mystical glow pretty much exactly like the light he had just made. Piecing the clues together, the kid figures the yellow light had to be a spirit, and tries to wrap his head around why the kingdom's official religion would be testing kids' hidden talents like that. The Spirit King flies next to him, asking if the kid really buys that this is all the work of the guy they're hunting. The legendary bird warns that he might just be wasting his time playing hero for these folks, reminding him of their actual main mission. But the mage claps back, bringing up memories of Klein, reminding the bird that their target was also obsessed with hunting young mages, and the details of the recent victims totally back up the theory. Jumping down a rocky mountain slope, he states with total confidence that all the pieces of this puzzle fit perfectly. Elkin argues hard that the village kids don't have an ounce of magic talent, which completely ruins any logical motive for a mass kidnapping. Sticking a smooth landing, the guy makes it clear that even with the plot holes, he would never turn his back on a situation like this. The crunch of his boots sliding on the dirt signals the end of his steep hike down the slope. Standing at a high vantage point with a sick view of the area, he plans to scope out the surroundings, positive he's gonna find a solid clue nearby. The spirit has no idea why they climbed up there, but the kid uses logic, pointing out that a massive group of hostages couldn't have traveled very far without someone noticing. With the wind in his face, he smirks and deduces the bad guys had to set up a base camp super close to the village. Staring at the massive forest, the MC realizes the only reason the locals haven't found the hideout is that it's cloaked by spells. Reaching his hand forward with serious style, he quotes that scammer from yesterday, claiming there's nowhere the wind can't reach. Commanding his mana like it's nothing, he summons dozens of tiny green spirits that scatter across the landscape below in seconds. Going into full focus mode, the mage waits patiently with his eyes closed while his trackers scan every single inch of the zone. He uses a high-level sensory link with the spirits, basically giving himself a crazy radar hack. The little wind critters zoom through the trees, scanning the thick woods looking for anything glitch. Through this mystic Wi-Fi, the outsider gets a flawless ground-level view of the whole map. It doesn't take long before one of the tiny scouts flags a weird, circular distortion hidden in the brush, exposing a shielded area. The kid snaps his eyes open and drops the spell, having completely zeroed in on the target's exact coordinates. He moves fast through the overgrown trail, walking straight toward the waypoint he just marked in his brain. Right in front of him, an invisible wall ripples slightly between the trees, proving there's a heavy-duty illusion barrier set up. With a sharp look, he tells his winged buddy they finally tracked down the kidnapper's den. Standing face-to-face with the cloaking tech, he admits he's pretty impressed the bad guys managed to hide an entire building without a visual trace. The legendary bird angrily crosses its wings and tells the kid to hurry up and crack the annoying spell already. Shrugging, Simon casually admits he has absolutely no clue how to dismantle a barrier like that, leaving the bird fuming over the lack of a plan. Raising his hand and channeling some dense energy, the mage decides the easiest fix is just to force the criminals to show themselves. In an absolute flex of raw power, he summons a massive greater wind spirit, a gigantic winged dragon that lights up the whole forest. Elkin instantly tenses up, sweating bullets as he warns that the brute force of a giant monster won't even scratch a defense built specifically to cancel magic. Totally ignoring his partner's freakout, the mage aims the massive attack with zero hesitation. The heavy spell shreds through the air and starts twisting into a concentrated drill aimed straight at the ground. Locked onto the target, he calls out the finishing move, Cyclonic Spear. The giant wind drill slams into the dirt right outside the barrier, tearing up the ground in a devastating spin. A massive explosion of debris kicks up a crazy dust cloud everywhere. Panicking over the kid's reckless stunt, the Spirit King starts cursing him out without holding back. Huge chunks of rock and dirt get launched sky-high, causing a massive earthquake in the whole zone. All that shredded earth comes crashing back down with completely unstoppable, crushing force. Simon quickly leaps backward, pulling a tactical retreat before he gets caught in his own mess. Landing at a safe distance, he covers up while the poor bird chokes on the thick dust cloud they just made. The violent impact rips massive cracks that shake the ground all around the hidden base. Thanks to the literal earthquake caused by the attack, the invisibility field crashes, revealing an old stone building. Once the dust settles, the kid explains that the building looked way too small to hide dozens of missing kids. He figured there had to be a much bigger underground space, and the only way to get the attention of whoever was down there was by hitting the whole structure with an earthquake. Defeated by that aggressive galaxy brain logic, Elkin crosses his tiny wings in annoyance, admitting the reckless plan actually worked. Flashing a confident smirk, Simon tells the spirit to chill, since they got the job done at the end of the day. The towering stone structure now sticks out like a sore thumb in the clearing, totally stripped of its illusion cloak. Hiding behind a tree, the young mage keeps a close eye on the front door. The rubble from the attack reveals a dark, quiet passageway at the base of the building. Guarding the entrance, a guy rocking a heavy dark cloak stands watch looking super intimidating. The dude is wearing a weird blindfold over his eyes, which basically screams he's part of that shady group the villagers mentioned. With a calculating stare, the MC studies the guard from a distance, waiting for the perfect window to strike. Right then, the hooded guy senses something off and quietly turns toward the woods. He takes a few steps away from the door, going to check out the aftermath of the random earthquake. Jumping on the perfect opening, Simon rushes in through the enemy's blind spot, using his magic to mute his own footsteps. Without giving the guy a millisecond to react, the kid lands a fast, precise strike, knocking the guard out cold and tying him to a nearby tree. Now wearing the enemy's sketchy outfit, the outsider sarcastically whispers that hell just be borrowing the fit for a bit. In full disguise, he casually walks into the enemy base, leaving the daylight behind. The kid's expression drops into a serious glare the second he feels the heavy, messed up vibes inside. Walking down a long, pitch-black staircase, he realizes his gut feeling was spot on from the start. Adjusting the final piece of his disguise, he ties the weird blindfold over his own eyes. Ready for the stealth mission, the mage asks his winged buddy if they're good to go. The stairs seem to go on forever, leading them deep into a massive underground cave lit up by an eerie blue glow. Hitting the bottom floor, the kid's boots step onto uneven ground surrounded by giant glowing roots. Checking out the alien landscape, he's pretty blown away by how massive the secret chamber actually is. The young guy whispers that this place definitely wasn't built by human hands. Feeling the sticky walls, he wonders if the whole base is just a giant clump of roots and hardened sap. The Spirit King instantly warns the kid not to touch a single thing, pointing out some super weird fungi nearby. Elkin explains that those mushrooms will literally explode if you tap them wrong, and the sap everywhere would cause a total disaster if it caught fire. Curious, the MC asks how the bird even knows this stuff, and the creature claps back with sass, reminding him he's got thousands of years of extra life experience. But the banter gets cut short when Simon tells the spirit to shut up, noticing someone else walking up. A second hooded dude carrying a box walks over, asking if the guard already checked out the mess outside. Playing it cool, the fake guard lies, saying the loud noise was just a rock slide and luckily nothing actually got wrecked. The cult buddy listens to the excuse in silence, seeming to chew on the info for a hot second. But the vibe gets super tense when the guy hesitates, clearly sensing that the math isn't mathing. Sweating over the long pause, the mage wonders if his cover just got blown in record time. The guy then points straight at the outsider's shoulder, demanding to know what the deal is with the weird bird. Heart-dropping, the kid realizes he made a total rookie mistake forgetting that carrying his partner like that was a massive red flag. The blue bird stares right back at the guy, looking incredibly offended that a human had the audacity to question his presence. The hooded dude glares through his blindfold, inspecting the little creature with extreme suspicion. In a sudden jerky move, the cultist tries to shoo the bird away with his hand, complaining and asking how long that pest had been inside. Still recovering from the near-heart attack, the infiltrator listens to his coworker, chew him out for slacking and letting random animals into the base. Keeping the act going, the kid bows his head and apologizes for the sloppy security. But deep down, the mage is internally screaming as he feels the terrifying aura from the spirit behind him, knowing the bird will never forgive him for being treated like a basic pigeon. Moving past the drama, the cultist tightens his grip on the box and tells his fake buddy to drop it and follow him ASAP. Trailing right behind the guy, Simon tries to fish for info, casually asking what's inside the box. The guy explains they just got an urgent memo from the bosses, cracking open a dark toolkit loaded with sharp instruments. With a totally sick tone, the guide says they need to hurry up and harvest the next batch of vital parts from the captive kids. Hearing that instantly trips a massive trigger in the young guy's brain, flashing back to that insane, terrifying enemy from his past demanding a heart. The shock freezes the MC dead in his tracks, catching a yell from the cultist telling him to move his butt. Swallowing his rage, the undercover hero forces a totally submissive voice and says he's on his way. The grim walk leads them to an isolated sector, marked by a heavy, creepy iron door. The rusted bars lock up a dark, damp, completely forgotten hellhole. The nasty sound of flies buzzing sets the miserable tone of the prison. One of the kidnapped kids is shown with totally dead eyes, too weak to even swat a bug off his own face. Sitting on the filthy floor, a little boy is quietly crying for his mom, clutching a plate of untouched food. Other tiny hostages are scattered across the stone floor, completely drained and broken after being in the dark for so long. A few little girls are huddled together in a corner, just trying to find a drop of comfort in this endless nightmare. Pure panic takes over the group the second the two hooded guys walk up to the bars, making everyone back away in terror. Seen through the iron bars, these two criminals look like the absolute worst monsters imaginable to these innocent lives. The guy leading the op points to a specific corner, telling the rookie to cover that side. Unlocking the heavy cell door, he steps inside with this sickeningly calm vibe. Staring down the terrified victims huddled in the dark, the cultist hums a twisted tune, asking which one he should start with. Simon just stands at the door, watching the depressing scene while the criminal picks his next victim. The kid's face hides an uncontrollable rage, bottling up all his hatred for the situation while he plots his next move in complete silence. One of the kids is already strapped down to a stone table with heavy chains, totally trapped. The poor boy is bawling in absolute panic while the man walks up, trying to sound comforting in the most twisted way possible. Flashing a massive, monstrous smile, the villain promises the victim that the pain will be over in the blink of an eye. The little guy can barely breathe, he's so terrified, just waiting for the absolute worst to happen. Without taking his eyes off the table, the cultist holds his hand back, ordering his partner to pass him a tool. Playing along, the outsider slowly pulls the cold item out of the box. The victim shuts his eyes tight, praying the nightmare ends in the least painful way possible. Annoyed that his tool is taking too long, the criminal snaps and tells his buddy to hurry the heck up. But instead of helping, the mage steps up with zero mercy and lands a brutal, crushing strike right in the attacker's back. The surprise hit freezes the cultist in pure shock, feeling that well-deserved karma wreck his body. Capitalizing on the opening, Simon instantly summons a thick spiral of green magic to blast the guy away from the kid. Getting absolutely yeeted backward by the gale, the criminal screams in agony, demanding to know who the intruder is. The sheer force of the spell sends the weird blindfold flying, smacking onto the cold dungeon floor. Totally wrecked, the guy throws a hand up in a useless attempt to block whatever is coming next. Revealing his true face wrapped in the ruthless aura of the wind, the MC coldly announces that he's the only one asking questions here, and the enemy is only allowed to answer. From the sudden impact of the strike, the cultist's body gets brutally launched backward through the... He goes flying across the dark prison chamber, totally helpless against the windstorm carrying him. Trying to wrap his head around how this intruder found the base, the guy realizes he urgently needs to warn the rest of the cult. But before he can even flinch, he slams hard into the thick iron bars, letting out a scream of pain. The kids locked in the cell watch the whole thing in absolute shock, huddled in the corner having zero clue what's happening. Not giving the enemy a second to breathe, Simon dashes forward at insane speed, boosted by his own magic. Taking the opening, the kid unleashes a relentless combo of wind blasts that pin the criminal against the bar. Glaring with pure fury, the MC demands to know exactly where Klein Heiss is hiding right now. The cultist looks up, face totally busted, and is genuinely confused by the question. He asks how some random kid even knows that specific name. Ignoring the enemy's confusion, the mage tightens his magic grip and throws all the atrocities committed by the Church of Erna right in his face. With a voice dripping with venom, the guy asks if the current king is also desperate to rip out a young caster's heart. Right then, a razor-sharp wind blade slices the air straight toward the guy. The hit connects hard, pulling an agonized scream from the criminal who can barely stand under the punishment. Keeping the guy pinned with magic, Simon repeats the order I scold, telling him to spill the target's location right now. The cultist spits out blood and, sounding completely defeated, just asks the kid to finish him off already. Hearing that wild request, the hero looks visibly thrown off by the enemy giving up so fast. Right under them, a small magic gadget drops from the criminal's hand and rolls across the stone floor. Letting out a weak, mocking laugh, the guy reveals that the little toy is actually the base's alarm. The device trips instantly, sending out a massive magic pulse that rings through the entire underground hideout. Smug as hell, thinking they still have the upper hand, the guy taunts that there's another mage on their squad and guarantees the intruder won't make it out alive. Looking dark and totally imposing, the MC states he'd never be dumb enough to forget a detail like that. Suddenly, a desperate scream drops from above as the backup mage gets violently launched through the air by a wind spiral. The hooded guy's body smashes into the floor with ridiculous force, taking a direct hit right to the face. Knocked out cold, the second criminal is out like a light on the stone floor with zero chance of fighting back. Staring at the mess with disgust, Simon complains about how exhausting it is having to hunt down every single one of these rats one by one. Slumped against the cell bars, the first cultist goes wide-eyed, completely paralyzed seeing his boy get dropped that easily. Without missing a beat, the dark-haired kid starts dragging the unconscious body down the dark hall. Getting close to the guy he's interrogating, he literally just chucks his coworker like a sack of potatoes. The knocked-out dude lands heavy right at his buddy's feet, making it crystal clear who is running the show here. The sound of dozens of rushing footsteps starts echoing down the halls, signaling the alarm definitely did its job. A massive squad of cultists rolls up to the chamber entrance, totally confused and yelling about what the heck is going on. The guy slumped by the bars screams that a lone mage broke into the base and already wrecked one of their guys. Processing the intel, the newcomers try to guess if the intruder was hired by the locals from that nearby village. Knowing they can't waste time, one of the thugs quickly draws a sharp blade, ready to throw down. But when they actually look into the lit area, they spot their defeated boy writhing in pain on the floor. The entire squad freezes on the spot, completely shook by the brutal scene in front of them. Standing chill in the middle of a bunch of unconscious bodies, Simon stays ice cold and asks if all the bad guys finally bothered to show up. Catching the kid's terrifying aura, one of the squad leaders instantly realizes they aren't dealing with a regular opponent. Terrified of losing their numbers advantage, he screams at his grunts, ordering them to rush the kid all at once with zero hesitation. In the back of the pack, an enemy caster starts charging up a complex purple magic circle in his hands. Meanwhile, the frontline charges blindly with their weapons, screaming threats at the solo outsider. Without even blinking, the MC raises an arm and summons a massive wave of green wind. The magic hits with sniper precision, blasting the first attacker trying to close the gap with a knife. The impact is so insane the guy gets swept backward like he weighs nothing, screaming as he flies down the hallway. The windstorm acts like an absolute wall, violently throwing back anyone dumb enough to get close. Calling out his spiral technique, the hero whips up a giant tornado that swallows multiple cultists at once, slamming them all against the walls. Watching the wipeout from the back, the enemy mage recognizes the nature spirits and realizes the intruder is a super rare spirit contractor. Wrapping up his own spell, the criminal yells his arcane magic's name and fires a heavy pink energy beam straight at the target. Seeing the lethal blast coming in hot, Simon just watches it with an insanely calm face. The magic attack slams into the floor at full power, causing a bright explosion that kicks up a ton of dust. Hyping himself up, the caster lets out a victory laugh, totally convinced that hit was enough to end the fight. But the smoke clears super fast, showing the impact zone is completely empty. The enemy's smile vanishes instantly, replaced by pure shock when he realizes he totally missed. Like an actual ghost, the wind mage quietly materializes right behind the squad leader. Stuttering in panic, the guy tries to figure out how the kid managed to move that fast. Offering zero explanations, the MC delivers a crushing blow to the guy's back, pinning him hard to the stone floor. Stepping heavy on the defeated thug, the hero figures he must be the boss around here and repeats his question about Klein Heiss's location. Even spitting blood, the leader starts laughing like a maniac, finding it hilarious that the intruder is looking for some guy instead of saving the kids. The weird tone and wild answer make the kids step back a bit, surprised by the prisoner's absolute audacity. Flashing a sadistic grin, the cult boss says it doesn't matter, since everyone there is about to get buried alive real soon anyway. He calmly explains that he rigged the tunnel to auto-collapse if the guards didn't shut off the trap after the alarm went off. Right on cue, a muffled boom echoes through the cave as the massive support pillars start cracking on their own. The ceiling's structure gives out under the magic pressure, making huge stone blocks plummet violently toward the ground. To avoid getting flattened, Simon is forced to dip with a quick backstep. Using the chaos and the dust cloud, the enemy leader turns tail and makes a mad dash for the back of the cave. Sticking a clean landing, the kid drops into a sprint stance, promising he's not letting the target get away that easy. Looking back, the criminal asks if the hero is really gonna chase him, while dozens of kids are about to get crushed by rocks. That dirty taunt makes the mage's eyes go dead serious, weighing the choice in a split second. In an explosive burst of wind, the kid blitzes forward at a crazy speed, leaving the target in absolute shock. Pure panic takes over the cultist's face when he sees the outsider practically breathing down his neck, with a bright blue glow in his eyes. Way above them, a ridiculous amount of dirt and rock pillars keep falling, threatening to bury the whole place. Blowing right past the enemy in an epic jump, the hero totally ignores the target to deal with the much bigger threat falling from the roof. The insane speed creates a heavy turbulence that knocks the cult leader off his feet, leaving him groaning on the floor. Completely locked in on protecting the hostages, the kid uses focused magic to shatter the massive boulders in midair before they can even touch the ground. Catching the brutal backlash of the attack, the cult leader gets blasted backward with zero chance to block the wind spiral. Looking super beat up, he lets out an agonized groan while trying to handle the pain from the crushing blow. Simon just stares him down with ice-cold eyes, keeping his form flawless in the middle of all the chaos. Trying to act tough, the criminal warns that it's already too late and the kids are gonna get buried in dirt, all thanks to the intruder. Backing up the threat, massive chunks of the ceiling start falling dangerously right over them. The dark cave is collapsing faster by the second, turning into a deadly trap. Freaking out, the cult boss screams, asking if the kid actually thought they'd make it out of there alive. Just then, a razor-sharp beam of green magic tears through the air at insane speed. The wind blast hits the falling debris with sniper accuracy, shattering the solid rock like it was glass. The hero channels his raw power to vaporize all the falling rubble, keeping the zone around them completely safe. With the most chill vibe ever, he announces he's just gonna blast a way out, and then they'll have plenty of time to chat outside. The cultist goes wide-eyed, completely floored by his opponent's insane confidence. He can't even process that the kid plans to blow a hole straight through 100 meters of solid rock, but realizes that with that kind of power, it's actually totally doable. Knowing he's about to get interrogated and wrecked, the guy chooses the nuclear option and triggers a self-destruct spell on his own body. Catching the sketchy movement, the mage snaps his head around, realizing the enemy is pulling something crazy. He turns his whole body in shock as he sees a violent red energy pouring out of the cult boss. The unstable magic blasts the criminal backward, while the spell goes totally out of control. It's obvious that arcane marks are glowing intensely all over the downed guy's body. The kid figures out the enemy pre-carved an extreme damage spell into his skin, just to avoid being taken alive. Without wasting a millisecond, the mage summons Elbairn, a majestic winged spirit that lights up the dark room. Realizing it's way too late to run, he decides to just tank the direct hit using a heavy-duty defense spell. The cultist's unstable magic hits the boiling point and starts detonating. Looking stressed, Simon triggers his ultimate protection move, Feathered Guard. Instantly, the massive spirit wraps the kid in its energy wings, popping an absolute barrier around him. The scene cuts to the forest surface, where a flock of white birds is just chilling on a branch. But they instantly scatter in a panic as they feel a massive tremor coming from near the stone tower. A pillar of crimson energy erupts from the ground, tearing through the earth with insane fury. The explosion is absolutely colossal, wiping out everything built on top of the underground base. Tons of debris and giant rocks get launched into the sky by the violent blast. When the dust finally settles, all that's left is a massive, smoking crater sitting in what used to be a peaceful landscape. As the smoke clears, heavy footsteps touch down on the rocky floor of the crater. The MC walks out panting and completely drained, feeling the toll of the crazy fight in his wrecked body. As the spirit's shield fades, he knows for a fact it would have been game over if he had reacted even a second later. Gripping his own arm in frustration, he curses the whole situation for letting his only lead slip away right in front of him. His head gets flooded with the insane image of Klein, wondering what that lunatic is plotting by using criminals dressed up as religious folks. Trying to chill out, he lets out a heavy sigh and admits he's totally wiped and has zero mana left to even think straight. The kid's tired eyes show just how physically wrecked he is after tanking an attack that massive. Right then, a soft green breeze starts swirling around the blasted battlefield. Floating gently down from the sky, the giant wind spirit brings all the missing kids safely inside magic bubbles. The little ones are exhausted and terrified, but they're finally free from the nightmare they went through underground. Some of them can barely keep their eyes open, literally passing out on the grass after so much trauma. Watching the flawless rescue, the mage looks super relieved that they didn't leave a single victim behind. Looking up at the clear sky, he decides the job here is done and it's time to head back to the village. The scene shifts to the town, where the locals are running around totally hyped, cheering for the hero. The group leader runs up out of breath, calling it ridiculous that he tried to just dip, and begging him to chill in town a bit longer. Being polite, the kid thanks them for the hospitality but says he's got a massive trip ahead and really can't stick around. Caught off guard, the villagers beg him to wait just one more second before taking off. The village chief hands over a small bag stuffed with coins, pleading with him to accept it as a reward for the miracle. Right behind him, that same woman who helped him before steps up with a bundle, offering food for the road to show their gratitude. The outsider stays quiet for a second, soaking in the genuine love from these humble folks. Raising a hand politely, he turns down the cash, explaining that official gigs charge fees through guilds, which wasn't the case here. The locals listen with confused looks, not getting why he'd reject a payday after busting his back for them. Only taking the food bundle, the kid explains he just solved the problem on a whim and the snack is more than enough. Time jumps ahead to late afternoon, showing a super peaceful orange sunset. An old wagon rolls slowly down a dirt road, taking the hero to his next stop. Inside, the spirit bird clicks its beak, obviously ticked off about something its master did. The legendary bird calls the kid a total psycho for making such a reckless move during the kill. The spirit lectures him, saying that secretly summoning a top-tier entity in the middle of a fight was absolute insanity. He points out that tossing the magic out of sight, just to rescue the kids, burned through an absurd amount of his life force. Taking the scolding in silence, the MC just stares out at the view, while the bird warns that one tiny slip-up would have cost everyone dearly. Flexing a dominant aura, the creature reminds him that even as the king of spirits, his powers have caps, and he can't save someone who literally dives headfirst into danger. Staying totally chill, the young guy calls his partner's name, trying to talk him down. He jokes, asking why the bird is sulking in the corner of the wagon, but the bird denies it and grumbles that he doesn't even care about what happened. Looking a bit sheepish, the mage apologizes and admits he genuinely had zero other options in that clutch moment. Purposely looking away, the spirit sighs in defeat, quietly complaining that his only bad luck was signing a contract with this specific kid. Changing the subject, Elkin asks what the heck he actually found out about the target they're hunting. Digging into his cloak pocket, the hero reveals he didn't get Klein's exact GPS coordinates, but he didn't walk away empty-handed either. He holds up a burnt scrap of paper saved from the base, pointing to a supposed religious branch in a nearby city. The scenery shows off a massive cathedral, while the kid explains that the place is home to a rich, powerful division of the Church of Urnia. Putting the pieces together, he figures the criminals knew Klein, and since the villain would never serve a god, this whole thing screams massive cult disguise. The spirit bird agrees with the theory, positive there's a heavy connection in this mystery. The clacking of the wooden wheels breaks the quiet of the road trip. Dropping the joke voice, the Spirit King admits he's had this question eating at him for ages, and asks what that scumbag did in the kid's past that was so unforgivable. Dead silence fills the bumpy wagon, proving the question hit a seriously raw nerve. Watching the young mage completely shut down, the bird instantly realizes the trauma runs way deeper than he thought. The terrifying flashback makes Simon suddenly gasp for air in the wagon, totally spooking the wind spirit with the random panic attack. Keeping his head down in the shadows, the kid looks completely wrecked by the weight of his dark past. The story then rewinds 10 years, dropping us straight into the kingdom of Terrace, where two warriors are going all out in an arena duel. The clashing of swords echoes everywhere as they trade heavy hits in a fight that looks way too intense for a basic spar. Mid-fight, the guy with brown hair yells out, furious, asking how his opponent could play so dirty after 10 years of having his back. Ice cold and ruthless, the dark-bearded guy just replies that a swordsman should let his blade do the talking, not his mouth. Without missing a beat, he charges up a heavy attack, his sword glowing crazy bright with a red aura. A massive wave of red energy slices through the air, crashing down brutally on his former bro. The incoming hit leaves the warrior totally frozen, realizing there's literally zero way to block that kind of power. The extreme force of the strike launches the brown-haired guy backward in a brutal wipeout. His body slams violently into the arena dirt, officially ending the match while the royal guards watch. Right after, the official announcer crowns the winner of the honor duel, hyping up the captain of the royal guard, Klein Heiss. Sheathing his weapon, the champ mocks his fallen friend, claiming the blade just delivered the final verdict they needed. Then the wooden gates of the arena swing open, and the guards announce the king's grand entrance. The monarch strolls in, slowly flexing hands covered in pricey rings, while he checks out the aftermath of the fight. Walking with his cane, the old ruler mentions he came to watch the first honor duel in years, but complains that it's already over. Pointing at the loser, he asks if Klein feels any guilt for wrecking an old comrade, quickly deciding that a useless weapon should be broken anyway. With eyes full of greed, the king praises the winner, hyping him up as the true sword of the kingdom. Bowing to show respect, the captain coldly agrees and doubles down that he exists solely to serve the monarch's orders. Later on, the scene skips to the massive royal dining hall dead in the middle of the night. While chewing on chunks of meat, the king rants about the mages rebelling against the military draft, calling them all useless clowns. Holding up some weird piece of meat on his fork, he asks if the guard has heard the rumor that consuming the heart of a young mage grants mystic powers. Kneeling at the other end of the giant empty table, Klein calmly confirms he knows that dark legend very well. Savoring the creepy meal, the leader reveals his insane goal to become a sorcerer, admitting he has no clue how many more hell need to consume. Staring at his underling like a total psychopath, the old man swears he trusts his loyalty 100% to get the job done. Hinting at a huge payout, the king asks if it isn't a total waste for someone with his skills to just be a captain without a fancy noble tie. Time jumps, showing the sunset lighting up the fancy rooftops of the royal capital. Inside his dark quarters, Klein swears total obedience while kneeling on the floor. Giving off pure sadistic vibes, the villain promises he'll execute the king's orders flawlessly, already plotting his next brutal moves. Miles away, the mood switches to a peaceful cabin in the woods, where a voice is scolding a kid's fighting form. Out in the yard, the brown-haired guy fixes Simon's posture while they spar with wooden swords. The kid is completely gassed, barely holding his weapon as he tries to process the coaching. The red-headed girl next to them complains, asking if he's already tapped out, and the little guy apologizes while trying to catch his breath. Chuckling like a nice guy, the coach suggests they take a break, totally ignoring the girl whining that she wanted to keep going. Right then, the guy spots someone walking up to the yard and announces their guest finally made it. Klein strolls down the dirt path looking weirdly happy, waving friendly-like at the boy. The kid actually tries to wave back, all excited for a second. But the smile drops off the boy's face instantly, replaced by a look of pure terror. The vibe completely dies when Simon senses the newcomer's freezing aura and greets him by calling him Dad. Wasting zero time, the training kicks off again, but way more aggressively, with the wooden swords clashing brutally. Standing super stiff, the guard captain barks at his son to try again after he botches a move. The sound of weapons smacking echoes through the woods, while the relentless yelling just won't stop. Afternoon fades and the sun drops, but the torture in the yard keeps going, with Klein exhaustingly demanding the kid get up and fight. In a ruthless move, the villain lands a heavy sword strike directly on his own son, not showing a single drop of pity. The boy collapses on the grass while his dad just stares in silence, judging the kid for failing. Knocked into the dirt on his knees, little Simon breathes heavy, hurting from the non-stop beatings. His eyes go wide in absolute panic when he looks up at the massive, cruel guy who's supposed to be protecting him. Staring at the kid with straight-up disgust, Klein claims the attack wasn't even worth dodging, doubting the boy is actually his own blood. With zero guilt, the villain hits him with another brutal strike that sends the kid flying into the dark night. The boy rolls in the dirt coughing in pain, completely helpless against that level of cowardice. Hearing the racket outside, Rosette rushes out of the cabin, frantic to see what's going down. Furious at the scene, he gets in his buddy's face demanding to know why he's punishing a 9-year-old kid so hard. Keeping his insane lack of chill, the captain fires back, asking since when kids don't fall on the battlefield, roasting his old friend for being soft. Glaring like a menace, he rubs it in that his other 2 kids were already taking exams for the Royal Guard at that exact age. Shivering from pain and fear on the ground, the kid can't stop crying after hearing his own dad call him useless. The story moves inside the house, showing a table loaded with bread for dinner to chill everyone out. The brown-haired guy asks sweetly if his nephew is feeling better, and the kid quietly nods. Chewing her food looking pissed, the red-headed girl swears that next time she'll beat up that evil dude to protect her cousin. Trying to keep the peace, Rosette says the captain didn't mean it like that, but Simon sadly admits he just wishes he had talent with a sword. With a warm tone, the uncle cheers the kid up, promising he's got super special gifts that make him unique. Bringing up the elephant in the room, Rosette asks if his nephew has told his dad about his crazy spiritual magic skills yet. Gripping his shirt feeling insecure, the kid confesses he didn't have the guts because he freezes in fear just looking at the guy. Offering to wingman, the uncle promises he'll try to talk to Klein about it, making the kid's eyes light up with hope. Sounding super friendly, the warrior swears the captain will be insanely proud when he finds out about his son's hidden talent. The flashback ends on a totally cursed note, with the villain's voice echoing in Simon's head in the present, while he tries to block out that traumatic past. Outside the wagon, the late afternoon vibe stays chill as they travel down the dirt road under the orange sky. Inside the ride, the spirit bird stares at his human partner's wrecked face in silence, totally understanding how heavy it is. Realizing he poked a massive open wound, the bird drops the questions, saying he can spill the tea later since he kinda gets what went down. Snapping out of his thoughts, the kid reacts softly, reaching out to pet the spirit's feathers. Apologizing for zoning out, he explains he was just lost in some awful memories, and thanks Elkine for saving his life back then. But the legendary creature fakes being mad, grumbling that saving him messed up his summoning and got him stuck in this weak form. The hero shows real love, knowing the bird actually cares a ton behind all that grumpy attitude. Suddenly, the road trip hits a wall when the driver yanks the horse reins hard to slam the brakes on the wagon. The guy yells from outside that it looks like there's a roadblock dead ahead of them. Curious about the random stop, the young mage peeks out the ride to see what the new drama is. With the wagon abruptly stopped, the young guy tells the spirit bird he's gonna step out and see what's up. Walking down the dirt road, he spots another super fancy carriage broken down ahead with some people huddled around it. The mage just watches the scene quietly, trying to figure out what the holdup is. It's pretty obvious the wheel sank into the mud, and someone's complaining that the ground gave way because it was too soft. A guy with long hair apologizes for holding things up, saying they already sent for backup to get them unstuck. Strolling up looking chill, Simon spots the issue and politely asks if everybody is okay. Right then, the carriage guard pulls his sword looking spooked and demands to know who goes there, but the long-haired guy tells him to relax. Flashing a polite smile, the passenger guesses the outsider is just trying to be a bro and help out. The MC is a bit surprised when he checks out the details on the guy's outfit. Thanking him for the good vibes, the man blesses the kid in the name of Ernia, proving he's from the same church as those cultists. Not wasting a second, the mage sneakily summons a tiny wind spirit. A strong burst of green wind wraps around the stuck wheel, lifting the heavy rig like it weighs absolutely nothing. The carriage gets popped out of the pothole and dropped safely back onto solid ground. The dark-haired guy breathes a sigh of relief, dropping a comment that they got lucky the wheels didn't get wrecked. The guard and the church dude are completely mind-blown seeing the kid bench press that kind of weight without breaking a sweat. Thinking to himself, the MC realizes the Church of Ernia just blew a very strange wind into his path today. The religious guy steps up to his savior looking super peaceful and grateful. With a calm smile, he says thanks again for getting them out of that jam. Playing the humble card, the mage replies he just did what literally anyone passing by would do. The guy insists that even if the kid doesn't think it's a big deal, that kind of help is always super clutch for them. Simon just stares the church guy down in total silence, scanning the situation. The hero's sharp look shows he's highly suspicious about this random meetup in the middle of nowhere. Flashing back to the psycho cult leader he fought in the cave, his brain is screaming asking if bumping into this priest is actually a coincidence. Deciding to poke the bear, the kid asks if he can drop a quick question. He mentions seeing monks from the church out in Ratville, and asks if it's normal for them to roam these middle-of-nowhere spots. The religious guy looks a tiny bit shocked to hear the name of that tiny village. Staring into the dark woods, the priest says in a super cryptic tone that Urnia is literally everywhere in the world. Dropping the smile, the man catches the vibe behind the question and asks if something went down. Realizing he almost gave himself away, the kid takes a step back and plays it off like it's no big deal. Forcing a friendly smile, he praises the church for checking on isolated towns, while internally realizing he shouldn't rush things. The guard interrupts the chat, warning them they are already massively late for their trip. The priest agrees instantly, pointing out they can't afford to waste any more time on the road. But before hopping back in the ride, the guy turns to the kid one last time. He officially introduces himself as Escott, a priest of Urnia, and asks for his savior's name. Caught a bit off guard by the random politeness, the hero hesitates for a split second. Not wanting to dox his real identity, he makes up a name on the spot and calls himself Rainian. Time skips to the dead of night, with the driver shouting they finally made it to the drop-off. The horses stop, totally gassed after the crazy long haul pulling the wagon. The trip wraps up at a fork in the road, where the driver explains the paths split from here. Simon tosses the guy a few gold coins, leaving the driver absolutely stunned by the massive tip. With the spirit bird chilling on his shoulder, the kid listens as the driver warns that getting into the city of Gred Hill is gonna be a massive headache right now. The mage pays attention to the warning, wondering why things are so locked down. Looking at the massive walled city in the distance, he asks if some major disaster happened for them to restrict access. Walking alone down the dark road, the hero heads straight for the fortress's giant gates. The legendary bird twists its beak looking annoyed, complaining that the whole zone smells like terrible energy. Checking out the extreme security, the kid agrees with the spirit that something incredibly bad definitely went down here. To avoid drawing aggro, he decides to drop the summon and walk into the city. Torches light up the thick stone walls, giving the place a seriously heavy vibe. A bunch of heavy wooden barricades totally block the main path to the gates. The front entrance is locked down tight by armed guards keeping everyone at a distance. The outsider strolls up looking chill, heading toward the blockade to see what's going on. Scanning the scene, he figures having guards is standard, but barricades that massive mean things are officially critical. The kid remembers the driver's rumor about the church dropping a trial on the town, looking confused by the weird wording. He admits to himself he's only heard super vague rumors about this so-called religious punishment. Getting close to the wooden wall, the MC is instantly halted by a guard screaming orders at him. The soldier barks aggressively that nobody gets in without an official pass stamped by the Church of Urnia. Keeping his cool, the mage asks what he's supposed to do since he doesn't have the paperwork, but gets instantly rejected. Looking genuinely worried, he begs the guard to at least explain what the heck is happening inside the city. Before the guard can even reply, the sound of frantic footsteps echoes right behind the kid. A local runs up to the gate looking absolutely insane, screaming that he's the only one left to take care of his own mom. The guards go into full panic mode and tell the guy to back off, warning he's in the final stage and better not touch anyone. Simon watches the chaos with a dead serious face, trying to figure out what the threat is. The man's body is covered in bizarre blue crystals bursting out of his skin, making the kid realize it's some kind of petrification curse. Desperate and running out of gas, the local trips and eats dirt hard right near the barricade. He groans in pain on the stone floor, trying to drag himself forward looking completely pathetic. Terrified of the freaky anomaly, the soldiers scream for everyone to get inside the base ASAP. One of the guards shoves the hero, telling him to back the heck up right now, but the kid asks if they shouldn't be helping the guy. The villager reaches out a shaky hand covered in glowing rocks, begging for someone to save him. Crying in agony, the infected man sobs that he still has so much stuff he wants to do in life. A tear rolls down the guy's face as he calls out for his mom in one final, heartbreaking whisper. Out of nowhere, a brutal impact slices through the air, completely uncalled for. Showing absolutely zero mercy, one of the guards lands a fatal strike on the downed local, silencing the man in the most brutal way possible. The MC goes wide-eyed, completely in shock over the sick move he just witnessed. The unstable energy collapses and the crystals start spreading aggressively. The man's entire body gets swallowed by the weird magic, turning him into a creepy crystal statue right in front of the May. The local woman watches in horror, claiming that this tragic end can only be the work of divine punishment. The fallen guy's arm just keeps getting eaten up by the freaky blue crystallization. Then the unstable magic reacts violently, turning the entire body into a massive, creepy crystal statue right in the middle of the street. Checking the situation up close, the mage raises a hand and spots a super important detail. He realizes the anomaly didn't start on the victim's skin, but actually grew straight from the inside out. Pissed off at the cruelty, the young outsider wonders how anyone can call an end like this a trial. An old man screams in total panic that the goddess Urnia is furious with the people. Kneeling on the stone floor, the guy cries out the deity's name while bawling his eyes out. In a move of absolute despair, the local slams his own head super hard against the ground, messing himself up pretty badly. With blood on his face, the old dude begs for mercy and asks them to drag that sinner far away. Without missing a beat, one of the guards readies his sharp spear to step in. The soldiers quickly swarm the mage, aiming their weapons straight at him. Not getting the sudden hostility, the kid asks what's up with the aggressive vibes. Looking visibly stressed, the guard stares at the kid's face and tells him he's gonna have to come with them. The MC just stares at the soldiers in silence, trying to process the order he just got. Getting escorted by the guards, the young guy hears that he's now been hit by the so-called Traelt. The inside of the place shows off a massive stone statue of the city's patron goddess. Kneeling in front of the image, believers pray hardcore, begging for the afflicted to beat the challenges and be reborn. The prayer keeps going, asking that everyone stays strong within the established divine rules. With his hands clasped, one of the devotees keeps his head down, showing total submission. Outside the church, a cloaked figure runs quietly across the dark city rooftops. The mystery guy stalks the street movement with a sharp look from the shadows. Meanwhile, back in the main hall, the sound of religious mumbling echoes nonstop. The night watcher locks all his focus on a very specific spot down below. In a flash, he jumps off the roof and disappears into the pitch-black night. Back at the gates, the guard spears are still up and ready for a fight. The crystal body glows in the middle of the road, while the kid stays surrounded by the stressed-out soldiers. Then the squad leader announces that this outsider is going through the trial at this exact moment. Catching their reaction, the mage figures out the problem was the splashed blood, wondering if the anomaly is actually contagious. With a cold stare, he quickly runs through his escape options. Loki prepping his wind magic, the hero plans to go loud if the situation goes totally sideways. Right then, the crowd around them starts buzzing and whispering in surprise. A firm voice tells everyone to stop right now, making the crowd part like the Red Sea instantly. One of the beat-up locals goes wide-eyed, letting out a gasp of pure awe. The guard takes a step back and nervously announces that the high priest just arrived. The dark-haired kid turns his head, clearly thrown off by the random interruption. Rocking a boss-level posture, the religious leader walks straight into the middle of the mess. Escott stops right in front of the kid, instantly recognizing who he's looking at. The crowd starts cheering in relief, screaming the priest's name with crazy devotion. Raising a hand, the guy promises the kid is fine and tells the soldiers to back off, totally ignoring the guard's hesitation. Trying to chill everyone out, he praises the unshakable faith those men have in the div. Walking toward the outsider, the priest casually drops that their meetup on the road definitely wasn't a coincidence. The mage cancels his spell and admits he wasn't expecting to bump into him again so soon. A drop of blood slides down the religious guy's hand while he grips his own robes tight. Not caring about the mess, the high priest drops to his knees in front of the injured old man to comfort him. One of the guards tries to excuse the drama, but the leader calmly says it's all good. Crying heavily, the hurt old man begs the priest to punish that crystallized sinner once and for all. The long-haired guy locks eyes on the creepy statue and calls the victim's sister. Walking right past the debris, he explains in a super serious tone that this person's trial isn't over yet. He adds that the real judgment is only gonna drop when the big day finally gets. With his speech done, the priest flips all his attention back to his young savior. With polite vibes, he suggests the two of them chat somewhere more private, away from the mob. The kid just nods, accepting the religious guy's sketchy invite. Keeping up the friendly act, the leader insists on paying back the massive favor he got on the road earlier. The locals respectfully clear the way, watching the duo walk off toward the inner city. The scene cuts to the dark church towers under the moonlight, while the priest asks why the kid is visiting. Walking down the long hall, the outsider explains he's looking for someone, and gets an instant offer for help. The mage follows the host's steps in total silence, scanning the fancy setup. Hitting the room, the religious guy opens the door apologizing for how basic the place is. Flashing a nice smile, he invites the guest in to share a hot cup of tea. The steaming liquid gets poured delicately into a super fancy porcelain cup on the table. Sitting comfortably, the priest begs pardon for the guards being jerks, excusing it by saying the city is in crisis mode. The MC cuts right to the chase and asks if he's talking about that weird human crystallization, wondering if it's some unknown plague. The long-haired guy pauses for a sec, looking like he's picking his words super carefully before answering. Putting on an understanding face, he decides it's only fair to explain things since the kid saw it all go down outside. The boy listens to the speech completely locked in, looking for any holes in the story. Holding his drink, the religious leader swears up and down that this is absolutely not a contagious disease. The creepy image of the statue pops up, while he argues that the public's panic caused a massive misunderstanding that's hard to fix. Not buying the excuse, the hero asks why the heck they locked down the city, pointing out that the order came from the church, not the government. He presses the issue, pointing out that a total lockdown makes zero sense if the problem isn't catchy. Trying to cover his tracks, the priest claims the population is on edge, and any random face could trigger a massive riot. Ignoring the fluff, the young mage asks point-blank what happened to the local who dropped at the gates earlier. With a mysterious look, the priest calls the kid by his fake name and says they're also looking for answers. He goes on a dramatic spiel, explaining that the church runs a purification center meant to house those hit by this trial. Wrapping up the BS, the guy promises those poor souls are still fighting the burden through heavy prayer. The priest casually walks the night streets, claiming he prays for those people every single day. He adds that at the end of the day, the goddess Urnia will always drop an answer for all this suffering. Meanwhile, the young mage walks his path alone through the dark city. The religious leader's voice keeps echoing, claiming that intense prayer is how the people manage to survive these trials. Flexing his unbreakable faith, Escott repeats that the deity will deliver salvation. Walking in silence, Simon thinks about the use of that very specific word to describe the tragedy. He connects the dots in his head, linking the recent village kidnappings to the mess happening here, absolutely sure this isn't a coincidence. Right then, the outsider gets caught off guard by a random sneeze out of nowhere. Glancing at his shoulder, he asks when Elkin got back. Confused, the kid asks if spirits can even sneeze, and the legendary bird admits he just faked the noise because he felt ignored. Not wasting time, the spirit wants to know what their next move in the city is. The hero decides they'll have to chill there for a bit longer for now. He tells his partner that the priest is 100% hiding something dangerous, but knows he can't just fight the entire church head-on. Because of that, he figures they need to find a sneakier way to investigate. Suddenly, the mage's eyes go sharp as he catches some sketchy movement right behind him, quickly dodging a sneak attack from the shadows. A mystery dude in a hood rushes in and slaps a hand over the kid's mouth before he can react. The MC's eyes go wide, instantly registering the incoming threat. Running on instinct, the mage blasts a concentrated burst of wind to break free. The magic hits the attacker dead on, wrecking his offensive stance in a split second. The impact launches the invader hard down the dark alley. The guy hits the stone floor awkwardly, feeling the surprise counterattack. Right after, he starts laughing at the whole mess, joking about how insanely unlucky the target was to bump into him of all people. The guy shows his face and confidently claims he already knows all the tricks of this spiritual magic, swearing he knows exactly how to counter it. But looking closer at the outsider under the moonlight, he thinks the face looks super familiar and compares him to an old acquaintance. Casually pulling down his hood, the kid confirms his identity and calls the merc by the name Edward. The attacker goes wide-eyed, completely floored by the reveal. Screaming in shock, he calls the kid by the fake name he knew and demands to know what he's doing out here. Getting over the jump scare, the guy starts giving the hero friendly pats, while the spirit bird complains about being called a parrot. Totally ignoring the demand for an apology, the warrior bursts out laughing and says that was just his special way of saying what's up. After the chaos, the two post up in a quieter spot, and the mage asks straight up what the old acquaintance is doing in the city. Leaning against the wall, Edward casually explains that mercs always go wherever the bag is. The MC flashes back to meeting the guy a year ago, back when he joined the same guild looking for leads on his target. Back then, the warrior used to roast the rookie non-stop, calling the kid a library nerd who never had a hard day in his life. Grabbing the kid by the neck way too comfortably, he promised to turn him into a real mercenary from then on. The reality, though, was that the mage always got stuck with the grunt work, like farming magic plants out in the bushes. Even during combat missions, the guy used the chaos to loot the losers and pocket extra cash without the boss finding out. Plus, if a noble client was being too annoying, he had zero issues causing accidents on purpose just to get petty revenge. Snapping back to the present, the kid mentally decides this is the exact type of guy he should never hang with, while listening to his buddy ask about his ties to the priest. The magic creature on the kid's shoulder watches the chat looking curious. Laughing, the warrior admits it's impossible to step foot in this city without knowing the priest's rep, even if the priest doesn't know him back. The outsider cuts the chatter, stating he has zero ties to the church, explaining he just helped the religious guy on the road and quickly shifts the focus back to the merc. Pulling a sketch from his pocket, Simon flashes Klein Heiss's face and asks if his old buddy has seen this guy around. Edward grabs the paper and studies the drawing super carefully. His chill vibe vanishes for a sec, replaced by a hyper-focused glare. But he quickly bounces back to his laid-back self, swearing he's never seen the dude and asking if the kid is also here grinding a bounty mission. Hyped by the random luck, the merc celebrates bumping into the hero at the perfect time. He confesses he really needed a sidekick for magic support on his current run. Explaining the catch, the warrior reveals the job is directly tied to the church, and since they run the kingdom, brute force won't fix anything. Dripping with confidence, he drops a sweet offer for the kid to squad up with him on this gig. Without saying a single word, the mage just turns around and starts walking away down the dark street. The merc is left totally hanging, having zero reaction to getting ghosted like that. Awkwardly scratching his head, he grumbles that he kinda saw that coming. The night stays freezing in the city while the warrior jogs after his buddy to try and hype him up. Tailgating the young guy, he tries to get his attention and asks why he's just wandering around so. Ignoring the stalker, the MC pushes open an inn door and asks for a room. The second he mentions needing a bed, the owner yells from across the room that they're completely booked. The middle-aged guy crosses his arms looking stubborn as hell, making it obvious he doesn't want guests. Staying chill, the kid asks again about getting a room. The owner's eyes bug out as he starts sweating bullets, recognizing the outsider who was in the middle of the plaza drama earlier. Going into absolute panic mode, the innkeeper grabs a wooden club and tells the kid to get off his property immediately. The innkeeper tries to swing the club at the mage, who effortlessly dodges the hit and steps back into the street. The next morning rolls in, lighting up the heavy stone buildings of the lockdown city. Walking around completely exhausted under the sun, the hero agrees with the spirit bird that the heavy vibe here reflects the total chaos going on. Stretching hard, he says he desperately needs to find a spot to crash and rest his body. The kid thinks to himself he never expected to find the locals this terrified, accepting he might just have to sleep on the pavement. Suddenly, his train of thought snaps when he spots someone walking up. A super friendly girl pops up, guessing he couldn't find a room and happily offering to help him out. Surprised by the good vibes, the outsider asks if it won't be a problem, since literally everyone else in town has been treating him like garbage. The girl grabs his hands tight and promises the locals are just acting dumb because they don't get what happened at the gates, since nothing's been proven yet. Introducing herself as Enoch, she mentions her family runs an inn nearby, and the hero replies using his fake name. It doesn't take long for them to reach a basic building with a wooden sign out front. The door to the little inn swings open, revealing a cozy setup away from the street drama. Pulling the guy inside, the girl excitedly tells her mom she brought a new guest. The older woman greets them with a big smile, welcoming the tired traveler. Checking out the rustic lobby, the kid listens to his new friend explain that the place might be old, but it's super clean and a quiet spot to crash. Scanning the modest room, the mage figures a night in a big city usually runs about 5 gold coins. Enoch sighs in relief, saying it's great he can stay, since the city crisis means they barely get guests anymore. Feeling grateful for the hospitality during such a messy time, the outsider mentally decides to drop a massive tip as a thank you. But the girl happily holds out her hands, demanding a ridiculous 100 gold coins a night, saying all the rooms cost the same. The kid is instantly paralyzed by shock, totally unable to believe the scam price he just heard. Right then, the girl's mom rushes over and scolds her daughter, asking what kind of crazy stunt she's pulling. Looking super embarrassed, the woman apologizes to the guest and immediately drops the rate to a fair 5 gold coins. Looking bored, the girl mutters that the mark was totally about to fall for the scam, leaving the mage feeling insanely awkward. Telling the lady it's chill, the outsider hands over 10 coins and claims he'd be sleeping on the curb if her daughter hadn't helped. The mom is amazed by the double payout, while the daughter brags that securing clients is her new full-time job. Hyped about her success, Enoch tells her mom to go rest in her room for a bit. The woman agrees, looking relieved, and says she's leaving the front desk in her daughter's hands before heading upstairs. Walking down the stairs right behind her, a familiar voice drops a comment that the inn was basically going bankrupt until just now. The girl asks if the guy slept okay, and gets a yawn and a complaint about the rock-hard mattress in return. But the second he opens his eyes, Edward freezes completely, recognizing the new guest standing in the lobby. The merc points his finger looking hyped, and yells the kid's fake name loud enough for the whole room to hear. The MC facepalms and lets out an exhausted sigh, unable to believe his terrible luck bumping into this guy again. A little time passes, showing an old iron pot bubbling over the rustic fireplace in the hall. The hot stew gets slowly stirred with a wooden spoon, getting prepped for dinner. Enoch walks over acting like a pro waitress to the table where the two outsiders are chilling, waiting for food. She serves the bowls looking proud, announcing tonight's menu is cornbread and onions. Annoyed, the warrior complains loudly, asking if it isn't a bit much that they've been eating the exact same meal for over 15 days. He turns to the girl and asks about her mom, wondering how many times he's gonna have to tell the woman to actually take a break. Wrapping his arm around the mage way too tight, Edward admits he's acting clingy because he's terrified his buddy will ditch him again. Annoyed by the obnoxious guy, the spirit Elkine pops out of nowhere and attacks the merc's face, making him scream in pure terror. Ignoring the guy's suffering completely, Simon asks how he knew about the scam the girl tried to pull at the desk. Watching the kid sweep the floor far away, the warrior explains she's working herself to the bone to pay off his commission fee. The hero doesn't really get why she's in debt, but his buddy reminds him the city is locked down and gets 0 new customers. Water sloshes gently inside a wooden bucket leaning against the inn wall. Wringing out a wet rag hard, the girl focuses on cleaning while Edward drops the bomb that her dad went missing. The guy figures the kid fakes all that hype just to keep her mom from getting even more depressed about the whole mess. Leaning in super close to his buddy's ear, the merc whispers that all the clues point to the local cult being involved. The intel hits the kid hard, instantly making him wonder if Priest Escott is pulling the strings behind the disappearances. Putting his empty bowl on the table, Edward shakes his head and says he hasn't managed to dig up that level of detail yet. Taking another massive gulp of his drink, the warrior guesses this whole thing definitely isn't a quick fix. The story shifts to the massive stone cathedral, hinting that the untouchable religious leader is hiding some heavy secrets. The image of the priest looks intimidating, while the suspicion that he's doing the dirty work behind the scenes grows fast. Inside the fancy hall, a massive crowd of believers kneels before the high priest, begging to be led into the light. Walking down the halls surrounded by his hooded goons, the religious leader keeps a chill, merciful vibe. One of the crystal anomaly victims begs for help on the floor, going crazy from the ridiculous pain she's in. Walking past the suffering folks, Escott coldly announces that the deity already knows everything and the panic they feel during these trials is totally necessary. The room is packed with people cursed by the freaky magic, while the priest claims the pain is just a temporary phase. Blindly buying his lies, a believer with crystals on his face clasps his hands, holding onto hope for the promised relief. Gently touching the victim, the religious guy swears the suffering will end the second they finally hit perfect balance. Flexing a divine aura, he tells the crowd to pray hardcore for that supposed day of freedom to arrive. The giant statue of the goddess watches from above as all this quiet manipulation goes down in the church's main hall. Snapping back to reality at the inn, the outsider finishes his food and says thanks for the soup he just inhaled. The spirit complains that the warrior trashed the food but ate the whole bowl anyway, and gets told that a merc needs a ton of calories. Far away, Enoch's mom yells from upstairs, telling the kid to drop the broom and go chill for a bit. But suddenly, the woman's face twists in pure terror as she feels something horribly wrong happening inside her own body. She loses all her strength and collapses onto the bedroom floor, dropping whatever she was holding with a scary crash. Totally clueless about the danger, Edward keeps bugging the young mage to squat up and knock out the mission together. The chat gets violently cut off by the young girl screaming in absolute panic, calling for her collapsed mom. The two guys sprint up the stairs instantly, with the warrior yelling to ask if his buddy knows any healing magic. Hitting the bedroom, they find the older lady tossed on the floor, thrashing in pain while grabbing her own leg. To everyone's horror, the wound on her calf reveals the early stage of that awful blue crystallization growing out of her skin. The mystic crystal gives off a creepy glow, proving that the so-called divine trial just tagged the inn owner too. The scene jumps to the depths of the cathedral, where the high priest slowly walks down a long, dark stone staircase. The religious leader's calm footsteps echo through the freezing, creepy basement, totally clashing with his holy public image. He finally hits the bottom floor, revealing a massive underground prison kept super secret right under the church. The guy strolls through the isolated dungeon, passing zones almost nobody is allowed to enter. A hooded grunt waits in the shadows and bows respectfully to his boss as soon as he gets close. The lackey reports that the spy work paid off, confirming the outsider is actually the wind mage who signed a contract with the King of Spirits. Getting that news makes the priest let out a sound of pure fascination, like he can't even believe his insane luck. He covers his face with his hands, totally blown away by finding such a rare power walking straight into his trap. Staring up at the prison ceiling with hardcore devotion, he screams his goddess's name in an almost crazy trance. Throwing his arms up toward a massive glowing orb of light, he thanks the divine with all his heart for dropping this blessing on him. The creepy room reveals gigantic formations of blue crystal, proving he's the sick mastermind behind the plague in the city. Looking incredibly hyped and insane, the villain claims the outsider's arrival is going to aggressively speed up his master plan. Staring down the crystal anomaly, he promises this divine army is gonna build a perfect world where only magic casters get to survive. Back to the nightmare at the inn, Simon closely inspects the infected leg of the woman lying on the bed. Young Enoch and the merc wait nervously in the corner, praying the hero can pull off some kind of miracle. Wasting zero time, the mage channels his green energy called Breeze, trying desperately to slow the petrification spread. But sweat drips down the kid's face as he realizes in pure panic that his healing spell is doing absolutely nothing. Scanning the weird crystal's resistance, he figures out there's a massive force inside her body aggressively kicking his mana out. Wiped out on the bed and sweating heavily, the girl's mom drops a dead serious request on the group. Expecting the worst, the woman begs them not to tell a single soul she's going through this trial. She explains that anyone hit by the anomaly gets forced into the church's purification center. Her biggest nightmare is getting dragged to that place and leaving her daughter completely alone in the world. Simon is confused by the panic and mentions he thought the center was just a normal medical clinic. The brutal reality is that nobody is allowed to visit inside, and absolutely zero people have ever come back out. The young mage connects the dots in his head, finding it super sketchy that the girl's dad also vanished thanks to the order. Right then, the older lady asks the kid to stop burning his energy, thanking him for the quick relief his magic brought. Trying to get comfortable on the bed, the woman shows how grateful she is for the help and formally introduces herself as Iris. Not blowing his cover, the MC answers politely, claiming his name is Lanyan. The Spirit King checks out the situation up close and spots something super weird, noticing the human has literally zero mana. Shocked by his partner's find, the kid finally gets why his healing magic got completely shut down. Suffering with her glowing leg, the victim tries to handle the pain, while the bird points out her body is already packed with somebody else's mana. Looking at the magic creature, the hero throws out the dark theory that this trial has to be completely artificial, not a disease. Sitting in the dark, he listens to the spirit agree things are critical, since the body's natural flow is totally wrecked. The legendary bird states as a hard fact that spiritual energy could never just naturally spawn in there like that. Hooked on the mystery, the young guy wonders why anyone would do something this horrific to the locals. The sound of the door opening cuts his thought process, pulling his attention to the bedroom entrance. Enoch peeks through the crack looking super anxious, warning them that church monks are downstairs asking for the maid. Down on the stairs, Edward loses his patience with the guests, telling them to rip off those weird masks and get lost. One of the hooded guys tells the merc to move, but the warrior threatens to snap their wrists so they can never pray again. Ignoring the threats, the monk looks up the stairs and announces the high priest is demanding to see the outsider. Walking down the steps looking totally chill, the hero confirms the religious leader really did promise to share something important in person. Worried it's a trap, the merc steps in front and tells his buddy to go back to the room, saying he'll take the heat. But the MC just walks right past his friend, telling the church guards to lead the way. The warrior is left completely dumbfounded, watching the kid turn himself in without putting up a single fight. Under the late afternoon light, the mage gets escorted down the stone streets, while his buddy watches the whole thing from the inn's door. Staring at the massive cathedral in the distance, the young guy mentally tells his spirit partner to scout the place, since detection spells are useless there. Even though he complains that this is grunt work for low-level spirits, the bird takes off flying toward the church towers. Led to the destination, the kid pushes open the heavy wooden doors of the main hall to face whatever is waiting for him. Standing alone in the giant cathedral, he connects the village kidnappings to the current crisis, knowing all signs point straight to the church. Feeling the crushing vibe of the place, the kid gets worried when he realizes his connection to his spirit is fading fast. Sitting up at the altar, the high priest says thanks for stopping by and finally drops the kid's real title, the Wind May. The long-haired guy stands up from his chair looking ridiculously respectful. Flexing max charisma, the leader admits it's an honor to meet the only human who ever managed to sign a contract with the King of Spirits. Keeping his guard up, the MC watches from a distance and sarcastically comments that the host sure knows a lot about mages' private lives. Cutting straight to the point, the outsider says he only took this sketchy invite because he needed to ask one super important question. Heavy footsteps echo through the empty hall as the hero closes the gap between them, grabbing the priest's attention. With eyes burning with rage, the young guy gets right in the guy's face, demanding to know if he's the one who unleashed the anomaly on the city. Escott breaks eye contact for a split second, keeping a creepy level of calm despite the direct accusation. Stepping closer to the kid, the villain drops a massive bombshell, admitting that on top of being a religious leader, he's also a light May. The MC's eyes bug out instantly, completely frozen by the plot twist he didn't see coming. Ignoring his guest's shock, the priest points out the hero has always fought for people and asks if he ever stopped to actually think about it. Pacing slowly around the dark room, the guy asks, sounding pissed, why casters have to be a minority in the world. His story digs up a bloody past, reminding the kid that regular humans always hunted down and wiped out magic users just because they were scared. The sick irony of the story is that, despite the absolute massacre, humanity always begged for mystic backup whenever things hit the fan. The villain's shadow looms on the wall while he trashes this messed-up reality, where inferior beings rule over the superior ones. Staring this delusion right in the face, the kid asks if this insane ideology is the reason innocent people are turning into rocks. Flashing a sadistic smile, the religious guy swears the victims aren't dead, but actually serving a noble purpose they should be thankful for. Throwing a hand up like he's in a play, he announces his grand plan to flip this upside-down social pyramid once and for all. Absolutely convinced he's holy, Escott declares that the perfect world won't have any room for regular people with zero magic talent. Pure terror washes over the MC's face, barely able to process the atrocity he's listening to. Glancing at the creepy crystal statue, the hero tries to figure out if this absolute insanity is an official order from Church HQ. Clasping his hands like he's praying, the fanatic admits the High Council doesn't fully grasp his enlightened vision yet. But he's 100% sure that once he paves the way with this trial, all the other leaders will fall in line. The villain's mental map lights up with a bunch of glowing spots, proving he already has the backing of extremist mages all over the continent. Reaching out with a twisted invite, the High Priest begs the hero to team up for this purifying crusade. The mage drops his head, hiding his own rage under the shadow of his hood before he drops his answer. Holding up the hand-drawn sketch, the young guy demands to know once and for all if Klein Heiss is part of this cult of lunatics. The church leader stares at the paper in silence for a second, surprised to recognize the guy the outsider has been hunting. Turning away from the drawing, the priest claims he and the guard captain share the same roots but are chasing totally different goals. Completely out of patience for more riddles, the MC charges up his green aura, while the villain officially ends the diplomatic chat. However, the kid's spell starts glitching out completely right in the palm of his hand. Totally lost, the guy tries to force the energy out, feeling his mana just straight up refuse to take shape. A quick memory hits the kid, making him suspicious of that weird heavy feeling he got when he walked into the hall. The last traces of his little tornado vanish into thin air, leaving him totally exposed. Way worse than losing control of his mana, he realizes his winged partner's divine presence has completely vanished. Watching his guest freak out, the host breaks the silence, announcing that this is the absolute most sacred spot in the religion. Flexing a winner's smirk, the leader officially welcomes him to his private prayer room. He brags that the architecture of this entire room was specifically engineered to totally wipe out any magic flow. The rule of the room is absolute, making sure no living thing can use special abilities in the face of the goddess's word. The mage starts sweating cold, terrified by the fact that it's actually possible to build a magic-canceling cage. Using his massive advantage, the high priest takes the first step toward his trap. With a super mocking tone, the fanatic admits he was incredibly hyped to meet the guy who trashed the Ratville base. Putting a hand on his chest in a weird, dramatic way, he claims his heart is bursting with joy for finally catching the legendary Wind Mage. The situation outside stays totally chaotic with crystal statues scattered all over the town square. Staring out the fancy window, Escott admits he knew the kid's identity the second they bumped into each other. The high priest brags that he finally found the ultimate partner to push his grand cause forward. Not even trying to be polite, he grabs the mage's hand tight in a super threatening move. The religious leader states in a possessive tone that he desperately needs the young outsider by his side for this divine run. Creeped out by the guy's audacity, the MC yanks his hand back hard to get some space. He throws it in the fanatic's face that this whole thing is absolute madness, and demands to know what his real connection is to Klein Heiss. Trying to keep the chill vibes going, the long-haired guy offers to explain the whole thing again in case he wasn't clear. He confidently points out that this specific guy the kid is hunting plays a totally different role in the master plan. Sick of the runaround and mind games, the hero rushes the villain to force a real answer out of him. Just then, an insanely fast blur zooms through the room and blows out the altar candle in seconds. Dozens of masked cultists step out of the shadows all at once and surround the kid, cutting off every single escape route. Far away from all that inside chaos, the knight creeps peacefully through the empty streets of Gred Hill. Carrying a crate full of apples, Edward hears the locals whispering weird stuff in the corners of the stone road. The merc stops dead in his tracks, trying to figure out what these depressed folks are muttering about in the dark. He keeps walking, realizing the church 100% has some super shady reason for all this movement. Thinking about his next move, the warrior wonders if he should just head back to his merc guild and drop this whole mess. Up ahead, the monks swear to the citizens that the high priest will pray for them non-stop. An old lady bows down saying thanks, praising the supposed blessing the deity is dropping on the injured people. Watching that brainwashing session from a distance, the guy wonders what kind of circus act they're pulling now. Walking into the inn right after, he slams the heavy wooden crate down on the rustic table without a care. Young Enoch walks up surprised, asking why he brought back so much food at once for the lobby. She thanks him from the bottom of her heart for being generous, but the merc grumbles he only did it because he couldn't stand watching the two of them eat dry bread anymore. Casually chewing on a piece of fruit, he brings up the weird way the priests were acting outside, claiming they were on a pilgrimage through town. The two women's eyes bug out instantly, absolutely terrified by the news the guest just dropped. The girl's mom explains in a panic that this is the church's official sweep to capture everyone hit by the trial. Right on cue, heavy, super intimidating footsteps start echoing right outside the building. Enoch hugs her mom tight, panicking that the church's dreaded guards must have already showed up to drag them away. With zero warning or asking for permission, the wooden door gets kicked open violently, scaring everyone in the room. The hooded monks block the exit and coldly announce they came to check if anyone inside needs divine assistance. The fanatics walk into the inn with slow, oppressive steps, while the warrior just leans against the counter watching them. The dark squad surrounds the two defenseless women in the middle of the room, cutting off any chance of running. Keeping a creepy smile on his face, the leader reaches into his robe to pull out some ID. The guy holds up a glowing crystal shard and warns that it represents the absolute will of the great priest. At that exact moment, the inn owner's injured leg reacts to the item and starts glowing super bright in the dark. The monk catches the magic resonance going off on the woman's legs and confirms his worst suspicions. Young Enoch starts sweating cold, realizing her family's worst secret just got totally exposed. She figures out in her head that the item is literally a magic radar designed to hunt down the hidden victims of the anomaly. The older lady grips her own hands tight, knowing a heavy punishment is about to go down right there. Loving how scared they are, the hooded guy asks in a sick way why they're shaking so much. Sounding super threatening, he mocks them, saying the two are acting like sinners about to burn under the judgment of the divine light. Taking another step toward the victim, the fanatic demands the woman chill out since there's no point in fearing what's bound to happen. Absolutely terrified, the inn owner hears that the religious leader will embrace all her suffering with compassion. Tired of watching this mental torture, Edward moves fast and grabs the monk's wrist with insane strength. Twisting the enemy's arm till it hurts, the merc listens to the guy scream in outrage about how he dares challenge the church. The warrior mocks the whole situation, sarcastically warning that he's gonna take care of all of them in the name of the goddess Urnia. Showing zero mercy, he lands a devastating kick that launches the squad leader across the wooden room. Landing hard from the hit, the fanatic screams orders at his grunts to attack the invader right now. The other hooded guys charge blindly at the merc, while the women try to back away from the heavy brawl. During the violent mess in the room, the poor girl ends up tripping and falls hard on the wooden floor. Jumping on the opening in the fight, one of the fanatics brutally grabs the inn owner's arm. The merc boils with rage seeing the cowardly move and calls the whole group a bunch of sick lunatics. In an explosive move packed with fury, he whips out his massive metal weapon, slicing through the air in the closed space. The strike hits the floor with crushing weight, wrecking the floorboards and sending a shockwave at the enemies. The monk who grabbed the defenseless woman takes the full force of the hit and screams in absolute agony. Taking a deep breath after the carnage, the man stands tall in the middle of the room, surrounded by defeated and humiliated cultists. Slumped in a corner with her crystals showing, the older lady cries her eyes out, admitting out loud that she really did fall victim to that cursed trial. The scene cuts back to the underground hideout, where Simon is keeping his head down, processing all the messed up info. The young outsider's eyes are ice cold as he witnesses the pure evil deeply rooted in that place. Totally stripped of his magic, the mage got captured and is now chained to a heavy stone chair. The room around him reveals a bizarre structure built entirely out of the crystallized and petrified bodies of random people. The hero looks up completely stunned when he realizes the massive scale of this sick cruelty plastered all over the wall. Furious, he demands to know if all those statues stuck in the rock are actually the innocent locals from Gred Hill. Staying super chill and evil, Escott promises the civilians didn't lose their lives, claiming they were blessed with a higher purpose. Checking out the giant cave packed with victims, the villain proudly rambles that it'd be impossible to count how many souls are serving this noble role. Refusing to accept the sick guy's delusion, the kid yanks at his shackles in a desperate attempt to break out of prison. The heavy iron chains snap loudly as they rattle around the restless guy's wrists. He throws his whole body against the thick bindings, proving he isn't going down without a serious fight. Watching the prisoner waste his energy, the religious leader arrogantly announces that those cursed victims make up the real divine army. Sitting chill at a table eating, the fanatic explains that their main job is to purge the world of anyone who doesn't have arcane skills. Taking a classy bite of his food, he concludes that the stone army is just quietly building up power until the final order drops. Boiling with hatred for the total lack of empathy, the MC mutters the priest's name in a super dark, bitter tone. He gets in the villain's face, demanding to know if the endgame involves completely wiping out every normal citizen in the territory. Smacking his silverware on the plate looking annoyed, the leader corrects the accusation, claiming the word murder doesn't fit his holy work. Flashing a disturbing, proud smile, the fanatic declares that Gred Hill is gonna be turned into the very first promised land for his religion. Getting back to the tense chat, the MC angrily asks what petty reason caused the defeat of those innocent kids in Ratville. Cutting a weird piece of meat on his plate, Escott calls the kid by his fake name and asks if he's heard about a very specific rumor. The high priest breaks down the insane legend that eating a young caster's heart can give mystic abilities to a regular person. Hearing that atrocity makes the mage's eyes go completely dark with pure hatred, instantly linking the info to his own past trauma. Far away, things get critical at the inn when the church monks grab the owner because of the crystal infection. The cult leader orders them to take the woman away immediately, but gets totally caught off guard by an explosive attack from Edward. Without holding back, the merc lands a devastating hit right in the middle of the hooded guy's face. Thanks to the crazy impact, the villain gets launched across the wooden room. To protect the two women, the warrior drops into a badass fighting stance right in front of the enemy squad. Taking advantage of the opening, he moves fast and lands a heavy blow on a second invader before the guy can even blink. Terrified by the sudden violence, another cultist backs away in a panic, calling his opponent a psych. But the warrior just grabs the guy's clothes to shut down any chance of him running away. In a furious move, he slams the enemy into the wooden floor with a crushing strike. Soon the whole room is covered in smoke from the brawl, with the defeated cultists groaning in pain on the wrecked floor. Taking a deep breath, Edward checks out the damage he just caused while relaxing his arm muscles. The noise grabs the attention of the city guards, who bust into the place with their spears, demanding to know what the heck is going on. Moving fast to lock things down, the soldiers surround the merc instantly, pointing their sharp weapons and ordering him not to move a muscle. Meanwhile, the religious fanatics are still squirming in pain all over the rustic room. Looking super beat up, one of the monks points at the inn owner and screams for the guards to drag the woman out of there right now. Cornered, Iris looks down sadly as she gets accused of being a sinner for trying to hide the trial. Staring down the armed squad, Edward clenches his fists and complains that this lockdown city has turned into an absolute circus. He quickly remembers his guild leader's advice, who sternly warned him not to cause any trouble during the mission. Deciding to ignore the warning, the warrior cracks his knuckles and figures it's a bit too late to back out, accepting he always ends up with the worst part of the job. Taking a confident step forward, he challenges the entire squad to a fight, admitting he was starting to feel suffocated anyway. Outraged by the disrespect, the cult leader orders the soldiers to arrest the merc along with the infected woman. The fanatic screams that the prisoner must be escorted straight to the main headquarters of the religious order. One of the guards looks confused by the direct order, asking why they shouldn't just take the attacker to the regular city jail. Coughing on the floor, the monk argues that the invader hurt holy members and the church itself will make sure to punish him for it. Hearing where the jail is makes the warrior stop fighting instantly, processing the name of the HQ. His eyes light up with a sneaky gleam as he realizes this free ride is exactly what he needed for his investigation. A look of pure joy takes over Edward's face, thinking it's awesome he's getting a VIP pass straight through the enemy's front door. Flipping his attitude in a split second, he says it's all good and throws his hands up, leaving the guards totally confused. In a great mood, the merc surrenders without putting up any more of a fight against the armed group. Getting escorted out of the inn, the two prisoners head out into the cold night with spears pointed at them. One of the soldiers ties the inn owner's wrists with a thick rope, treating her like a dangerous criminal. Looking over her shoulder, the woman calls out for her daughter, her face full of pain and worry. The young girl can't hold back her tears, crying frantically as she watches her mom get dragged away like that. Already tied up, the warrior looks back and kindly asks the kid not to look so crushed. Overflowing with confidence, he promises he'll finish the original job and bring her parents back safe and sound. Wiping her wet face, Enoch trusts the big guy's words and nods, pulling together the last bit of her courage. The soldiers shout the march order, leading the captives through the stone alleys away from the property. A heavy silence takes over the empty room, leaving the young girl all alone in the shadows of her own home. The scene cuts back to the underground feast, where the high priest agrees the mystic rumor is nothing but a pathetic lie. Staring down the prisoner, the villain asks if the kid has any idea how many innocent children were lost because of that ridiculous belief. The religious leader's memory paints a hellish massacre, where innocent people lost their lives surrounded by fire and absolute despair. A dark hand holds up the result of that terror in the middle of the flames, showing the madness caused by the brutal legend. Looking at the destruction of the past, Escott fakes being sad, saying that thinking about those losses still breaks his heart to this day. Explaining the sick details, the guy mentions the story has a tiny bit of truth, since consuming the victim boosts the attacker's mana for a bit. The young outsider listens to all this tied in chains, while the priest adds that the power-up happens even if the victim has zero magic. Slicing his disgusting meal, the religious guy concludes that the jealousy of humans without talent twisted the facts, since only mages can actually absorb that energy. Pointing at the crystallized citizens, the villain warns that the divine will is massive and demands an equally heavy price to become real. Closing the distance to the prisoner, he coldly states that what happened in Ratville was basically the foundation to build the promised land here in Gred Hill. Suddenly, a colossal golden aura blows up around the high priest, who opens his arms asking if his intentions are finally crystal clear. With his eyes glowing with pure fanaticism, Escott drops one last solemn invite, begging the kid to agree to help build the exclusive world for casters. Outside, the stone front of the humble inn stays quiet under the cloudy night sky. In the dim bedroom, young Enoch sits on the edge of the bed staring hard at a small box in her hands. Sweet memories flood her mind, bringing back the tight, protective hugs from her dad. Holding an old family picture frame, the girl whispers how much she misses him, trying to find the strength to deal with this whole trial. The memory shows the day the man handed that exact package to his daughter looking incredibly serious. Replaying his warning, she remembers the magic item was only supposed to be used when she needed to protect someone truly precious. Hit by a sudden wave of determination, Enoch jumps up from the bed, realizing it's time to make a move. She runs to the nightstand and yanks the wooden drawer open to grab the gift her dad left behind. Without hesitating, the young girl pulls a small blue stone out of the box that glows with an intense mystic light in the dark room. Pressing the artifact to her chest, the girl swears to herself she's not gonna just sit around doing nothing. Far away, the massive stone building of the religious HQ stands tall and scary against the gray sky. In the dungeons, the hero looks super pissed, asking if all those kids had to disappear for such a petty reason. In a burst of pure rage, Simon lets out a massive yell and yanks the iron chains with all his physical strength. The kid's chained fist starts glowing weakly, proving he's forcing his mana to wake up even inside the magic-canceling cave. Tiny sparks of spiritual energy try to form in the air, fighting violently against the barrier of the sacred room. A wide shot shows the prisoner thrashing in the chains in a massive effort, while the villain just watches the show looking totally chill. The mage is absolutely exhausted, panting from the crushing weight of trying to summon power in there. Ignoring how wiped he is, he pushes it one more time, whipping up an unstable green whirlwind around his trapped body. Watching the stubborn resistance, the high priest sighs wrapped in his light aura and asks if that useless rebellion is his final answer. The religious leader's eyes are full of cold superiority as he stares at the young guy who refuses to hold the L. Explaining the trap, the fanatic warns that the architecture turns mana into literal dead weight, ensuring that the harder the kid fights, the worse his body is gonna hurt. Escott watches completely stunned as green magic actually starts taking shape in the chained kid's hand. A bright, dense sphere of wind forms in the prisoner's palm, totally defying the heavy restrictions of the holy room. Blown away by the show, the high priest admits the density of that energy is terrifying, confessing he can't even begin to guess the limit of the kid's power. Exhausted by the insane effort, the hero pants heavily while noticing something sketchy happening to his own spell. The fanatic's face is lit up by the green light, showing a sick smile totally full of greed as he looks at that display of raw power. Wasting zero time, the villain raises a hand and simply starts draining the kid's magic straight into himself. All that green aura the mage fought so hard to make gets ruthlessly sucked right into the religious leader's body in the middle of the cave. Absorbing that pure energy, the priest's eyes glow with a fresh, terrifying intensity. Powered up, the man stands tall and summons huge blue crystals all around, proving he has absolute control over the underground space. Seeing the prisoner panting and shocked, the villain hypes up his spirit contractor title, joking that having that much power would make any colleague die of jealousy. Right then, he spills how hard it is to maintain a whole army of petrified people by himself, explaining that the flex requires an absurd amount of magic. Admiring his own hand now loaded with stolen power, the fanatic just loves the quality of that amazing life energy. Commanding a colossal golden aura, Escott announces the waiting time is over, complaining that he has to use force since the kid rejected the holy invite. Stressed by the heavy vibes, the MC thinks to himself he's never seen anyone in his life who could cancel and control someone else's mana in such a freaky way. The young guy's brain is working overtime while watching the enemy back up, guessing that the other extremist mages probably share the exact same cheap trick. Desperate, he wonders if Klein Heiss is the real mastermind behind all this madness, but quickly realizes he doesn't have time to worry about that right now. Focused strictly on surviving, the mage yanks at the heavy chains, trying to come up with an immediate escape route out of that cold stone chair. On the flip side, the high priest is vibrating like a maniac, completely amazed by the glowing energy he just keeps on absorbing. Because of the insane magic pressure, the crystal structures in the room suddenly start shattering, sending sharp shards flying everywhere. Gritting his teeth with serious resolve, the hero promises himself he's gonna find a way out of this cursed prison no matter what it takes. Far from there, dust falls from the stone ceiling of another dark dungeon, showing that the place is also getting hit by some serious tremors. Feeling the ground shake, Edward notes it feels exactly like an earthquake and asks if it wouldn't be a smart move for them to dip out of there ASAP. Checking out the thick iron bars of the cell, the merc thinks it's super sketchy for a religious HQ to have a prison setup like this right under the people's noses. Tied up with chains in a rusty rig, the warrior jokes, asking if the priests run secret torture sessions in the city's basement during their free time. Trying to spark a conversation looking totally chill, he calls out to the hooded guard, who just completely ignores the taunt in dead silence. Accepting the ghosting, the man thinks to himself he managed to sneak into the enemy base like he planned, but now he has a real problem. He has no clue where the medical wing is. Suddenly, a tiny object drops onto the stone floor right behind him, breaking the heavy tension of the cell with a sharp clack. Ignoring the noise for a second, the prisoner guesses his gut is telling him there's an even deeper, darker path inside this building. But when he focuses on the random movement in the shadows of the cell, the merc's eyes go wide, completely caught off guard by what just showed up. Hiding shyly behind the wooden pillar, young Enoch pops out of nowhere, leaving the warrior unable to believe she got herself into such a dangerous mess. Shocked by the ridiculous situation, the guy wonders internally how on earth a normal kid managed to sneak into the church's super-guarded dungeon like that. Freaking out over the big guy's yell, the girl puts a finger to her lips, begging him to shut up immediately so he doesn't alert the guard standing right outside. Sweating cold over the slip-up, the warrior realizes he needs to act fast to fix his mistake and distract the religious fanatic at the door. Using his acting skills, the tied-up merc fakes a violent puking fit, screaming his lungs out to grab the guard's attention instantly. Totally confused by the prisoner suddenly getting sick, the hooded guy walks up to the bars while the young girl crawls quietly through his blind spot. To make sure the plan goes off without a hitch, Edward coughs even harder and makes weird groaning sounds, keeping the guard 100% focused on him and not the side hallway. Capitalizing on the lucky distraction, the girl's careful hand slowly reaches for the heavy iron keychain tossed on the rustic table. With her heart racing and shaking from nerves because of the risk, Enoch hesitates for a split second before making the final grab for the item. In a quick and super precise move, the young girl snatches the heavy iron keys and pulls them close without making a single metallic clink. Hidden safely in the dark, the girl celebrates her mini-stealth mission's success with a massive sigh of relief and a huge smile. However, the piece lasts for exactly 2 seconds before the merc screams the girl's name in pure panic, shredding his vocal cords. The worst-case scenario happens when another fanatic steps out of the shadows and violently grabs the girl by the collar, sending the keys flying across the hard floor. The scene cuts back to the Crystal Prison, where the MC is still fighting a losing battle against his chains, dripping with cold sweat. Even under the insane pressure of the sacred barrier weighing down his body, tiny spheres of green mana keep spawning near the stubborn kid. Watching the whole thing from above, the high priest pities the useless grind, darkly warning that magic burnout is gonna lead to the kid's tragic end real soon. While the hero tries to keep his wind sphere alive, the villain steps up, praising the truly outstanding quality of that pure spiritual energy. Without breaking a sweat, the religious leader just drains the spell the kid created all over again, letting out a sigh full of creepy satisfaction. Soaking up that much life force makes the golden aura around the fanatic grow to a massive size, lighting up the guts of the stone cave. Calling the prisoner by his fake name, Escott coldly warns that the second his life runs out right there, his journey is officially over. Staring the villain dead in the eyes with a sharp look, the mage listens to the fake pitch that if he stays alive and serves the order, his potential will be limitless. Certain he finally broke his prey, the high priest turns his back and walks up the stairs, announcing he'll be back the minute the night service wraps up. Pushed to the absolute limit, thick drops of blood start dripping from the beaten MC's wounds, staining the freezing floor in a super depressing way. Super beat up and exhausted, the young guy stays locked tight to that massive sacrifice chair, dealing with the pain of the shackles digging into his skin all by himself. Forcing out another useless wind current, he bitterly realizes the result is always a total fail against the room's restrictions. Checking out the heavy bracelets on his arm, the hero figures out the gadget literally sucks his power, making the trap stronger with every spell he tries to cast to escape. Out of practical options and losing strength fast, he drops his head, cursing his own helplessness and desperately wondering how to break out of this endless torture. Scraping together his last drops of energy to fight, the kid forces his magic one more time when a sweet memory of his late uncle echoes in his head, telling him to be brave. The nostalgic flashback brings up an image of the hopeful little boy from way back, when excitedly asking if the nice warrior was going to tell his dad about his new powers. Rosette smiles in a super warm, protective way back then, promising that the guard captain would absolutely be bursting with pride if he knew about his son's spiritual talent. But the sweet dream gets ruthlessly crushed by the terrifying sight of the family cabin being swallowed by raging flames, drowning out the little boy's desperate screams for help. The nightmare takes an incredibly cruel turn, showing that the kind warrior uncle was brutally and mercilessly taken out on that awful night. The massive, demonic outline of Klein Heist stands untouchable in the middle of the heavy fire, holding the proof of his horrific crime while everything around him turns to ash. Flashing back just a few seconds before that final tragedy, the crying kid asks his own dad the crazy reason why he's attacking their family. Flashing a dead, inhuman stare, the villain calmly states he's just following King's orders, demanding the terrified kid do something useful with his life for once. Consumed by absolute rage over the cowardly betrayal against her husband, the young redhead charges through the fire with her sword drawn to fight the monster. But the woman's reckless attack gets swatted away with humiliating ease and zero mercy, silencing the little MC's desperate warning scream. Thick tears roll down the kid's face as he freezes in pure panic, going into total shock seeing the people who loved him get dropped. Already super beat up and exhausted by the unfair fight, the uncle bravely steps in front of the threat and gives a direct order for his little nephew to run far away. Screaming with lungs burning from the thick smoke, the man demands the kid listen to him and bolt from the burning house to save his own skin. However, the protector's noble sacrifice is completely useless when the captain lands a final, dirty hit right in his back, putting an end to his defense for good. Stepping on the floor stained by cowardice in front of the high flames, the dark figure of the killer walks toward the kid without showing a single ounce of regret. Staring at his own kid with a look of pure manic insanity, the executioner reaches out a calloused hand and demands to take the kid's heart once and for all. Feeling the weight of that crushing trauma makes the hero snap back to the reality of the dungeon, with a jolt sweating cold while absolute hatred takes over his mind. Channeling years of bottled-up rage into an explosion of pure power, the kid ignores the mystic barriers and makes thousands of wind beams spark violently through the chains. Getting into a furious stance and grinding his teeth, the mage yanks at the heavy iron chair, swearing to himself that his run is absolutely not ending here. Even with his body at the breaking point, the chained kid summons a green wind sphere in the middle of the dark again. The exhaustion hits hard, leaving the mage panting as he realizes his grind might be totally useless against that barrier. Looking up, a random idea pops into his head, giving him a brand new option to bust out of that prison. Right then, the scene cuts back to the dungeon, where young Enoch's desperate scream echoes through the freezing stone cells. The girl thrashes nonstop in the arms of one of the hooded monks, aggressively demanding the guy let her go. Struggling to hold the kid, the fanatic asks in total confusion how a child managed to break into that restricted floor. Stuck right behind the bars, the merc yells furiously, telling them to drop the girl and sarcastically asking if acting like a coward is what their goddess actually teaches. Seeing the big guy locked up, the young girl remembers her dad's serious warning about only using a special item to protect someone super important. Gathering all her guts, she yanks the mystic stone out of her pocket and calls for the warrior, catching the cultists completely off guard. Silence takes over the dark hallway as the order's guards watch the prisoners move, without really getting what's about to happen. Desperate, the girl tries to break free from the grip, and screams the merc's name over and over asking for backup. Caught slipping by a sudden jerk, the monk accidentally drops the girl, who loses her balance and faceplints on the dungeon floor. With the sudden fall, the little crystal artifact slips out of her hands and hits the stone floor with a sharp crack. Instantly, the blue stone reacts to the impact and starts pulsing with a super bright glow. A massive explosion of mystic energy takes over everything, lighting up the entire hallway with a blinding flash. Miles away in the giant purification center, the religious leader's voice echoes, promising that the pain the people feel is just a passing phase. Dozens of terrified locals huddle in the sacred hall, whispering prayers while trying to handle their fear of the unknown. Bathed in a golden aura, the priest promises in a calm tone that balance will come as soon as they get over their panic. Throwing his arms up, he declares the suffering is gonna end, and everyone will finally be made whole in that holy place. In his hand, the villain tightly grips the crystal shards that control the isolated city's trial. The believers look totally confused when the stones stuck in their bodies start glowing intensely and completely out of control. In a terrifying second, the unstable magic crashes and massive crystals start ripping out of the victims' bodies while they scream in agony. Watching his own people freak out, the fanatic just praises the deity's name, completely ignoring the cries for help aimed at him. Panic totally floods the hall as people squirm, feeling their bodies being violently eaten by the blue petrification. A bizarre wave of transformation hits the whole crowd, turning innocent locals into monstrous, living crystal statues right in the middle of the church. Showered in the light of that tragedy, the high priest raises his hands in a state of pure spiritual hype. The guy's face is full of a sick sense of peace, positive that his cruel crusade is the actual path to salvation. Staring at the broken statue of the patron goddess, he prays with devotion to be led to his epic destiny. During the destructive process, a bunch of sharp shards from the magic stone scatter all over the floor. Just then, the heavy metallic sound of thick chains snapping echoes threateningly through the shadows of the room. Back in the underground jail, the MC channels a ridiculous amount of magic, spawning a massive wind vortex around the chair. Sweating cold, he realizes the room's trap works by sucking up any magic energy released and turning it into crushing physical weight. Staring at the red core of the machine on the ceiling, the young guy figures out that forcing a reverse mana flow could cause a critical overload in the system. Gritting his teeth from the insane effort, the hero accepts the risk of the machine blowing up, since just sitting there would cost his life anyway. With a sharp glare, he focuses completely to make sure the magic pressure hits the exact weak point of the structure, and not everything around him. If the math is wrong, the mage's body won't handle the spell's kickback, and hell explode right along with the green storm taking over the room. At the exact same time in the Purification Center, the locals completely lose their minds as the petrification takes over. The victims morph into twisted, grotesque shapes, letting out beastly roars that echo through the giant hall. A colossal legion of crystal monsters spawns in the church, while the priest's voice claims the deity rewards the patient ones. Looking down at that freaky army, Escott looks pleased, deciding his moment to act is finally. Twitching his fingers in a command gesture, the religious leader decides to take the next step before even checking if the outsider accepted his invite. Bending to the master's will, one of the crystal creatures reaches out a hand in a stiff, terrifying move. Taking control of that destructive force, the fanatic announces it's way past time to kick off his plan. The villain's golden magic connects with the statues, making a burning energy overflow from inside them. Overwhelmed by this crazy power, one of the monsters lets out a deafening roar, shooting beams of pure light from its eyes and mouth. The priest's silhouette stands out in the magic flash, watching his twisted creation come to life in the holy room. Showing off how proud he is of his own cruelty, he names those creatures the true divine legion, ordering them to carry out the supreme will. Instantly, one of the crystal monsters lunges aggressively, its eyes glowing bright red while it lets out a threatening roar. In another section of the massive religious building, a long, quiet stone hallway guards the Order's darkest secrets. The inn owner runs panting through the shadows, trying to escape the awful fate waiting for her in that place. Running barefoot on the freezing floor, the woman ignores her body hurting and rushes to find any way out. Stopping in the pitch black, Iris breathes heavy and wonders, completely lost, which way she's supposed to go. Things get heated in the dungeon when intense green wind blades start slicing the air at crazy speeds. The MC gets wrapped up in a chaotic storm of magic and lightning, pushing his body's limits against the room's trap. Bleeding heavily, the kid lets out a groan of pure agony while he tanks the crushing pressure of the spell. The massive effort finally pays off, causing a huge crack in the heavy cuffs locking his wrists. The wind energy condenses into a gigantic glowing sphere, spinning wildly around the prisoner. The hero screams with burning lungs, his eyes overflowing with the glow of spiritual essence while he forces the technique. Tasting blood in his mouth, he realizes his crazy plan to overload the gadget is going down the exact dangerous path he calculated. The reverse flow hits a breaking point, creating internal pressure so insane that the mage's body is on the verge of totally collapsing if he keeps it up. He knows if he drops the intensity, the spell gets eaten by the room, so he has to keep the exact right amount of brute force against the system. The overload maxes out the material's limit, making the thick metal structures start snapping with loud cracks. The kid sees his wild strategy is working and just asks for a tiny bit more time. Unable to hold back the mystic hurricane, the heavy machinery can't take the pressure and blows up violently into the air. The gale spins with devastating force around the chair, while the outsider pushes himself to the max to finish his escape. Outside, the giant night cathedral gives off a creepy red glow while terrifying roars echo through the streets. Panic hits the city as desperate locals trip over people fallen in the middle of absolute chaos. Without a single drop of mercy, the crystal creatures push forward like monsters, causing massive damage and treating the people with extreme violence. A terrified crowd runs from the Legion's crushing charge, screaming for help while trying to keep their kids safe from the incoming danger. Clueless about the mass panic, one of the religious fanatics stays kneeling in the shadows, praying for people to beat the trial and be reborn. Cornered by one of the stone beasts, the monk whispers, full of faith, that the high priest will definitely protect him from the threat. But his fake belief doesn't do squat, and the monster lands a devastating hit, permanently ending the church lackey's life. The cultist's holy mask shatters on the stone floor, sinking into a sad reminder of his leader's betrayal. While chaos takes over the area, Enoch's mom keeps up her exhausting sprint through one of the main building's massive halls. Hearing dark footsteps creeping up behind her, the woman turns her head, completely paralyzed by terror. The chase hits its peak when one of the crystal statues lets out an ear-piercing roar right behind the woman. Terrified by how close it is, she loses her footing and wipes out on the stone floor of the giant dark hall. The monster pushes forward ruthlessly, forcing the victim to drag herself away in a desperate attempt to escape the beast's attack. Scared that this is game over, the mom turns her face and whispers her daughter's name in one last cry for help. Unable to get away, she takes a brutal hit to the back, letting out an agonizing scream of pain that echoes through the room. Further down the same hallway, two figures step out of the shadows, freezing when they see the tragic scene. Young Enoch recognizes the victim on the floor and calls out for her mom, her voice totally breaking from shock. Desperate, the girl tries to run over there, but the merc holds her back tight while she bawls her eyes out. Edward is absolutely floored by the crazy situation and asks what kind of freaky creature that is in front of them. Noticing new targets, the stone beast slowly turns around and lets out another threatening. Then the scene cuts to Simon's prison, where the thick magic chains finally start to snap. The rig holding the kid shatters completely, blasting heavy debris everywhere. Totally free from the trap, the hero stands panting in the middle of the wrecked room after his insane effort. The silence is broken by a familiar voice, scolding the kid and calling him reckless for almost getting himself killed again. The legendary bird Elkin drops from the sky, bringing instant relief to the mage who calls out his name. Sitting on the floor with his partner in his hands, the hero asks if he's okay, but the spirit claps back that the kid needs to worry about himself. The legendary bird admits he already suspected trouble when their connection got cut, noticing how beat up the mage looks. The young guy agrees, admitting he got totally blindsided by some cheap tricks from the enemy. He tries to stand up, saying they need to stop Escott right now, but stumbles in pain and gets a lecture from the bird for trying to move with 0 HP. Suddenly, the blue creature goes on high alert, sensing a weird energy hanging in the air. The Spirit King warns that something incredibly bad just started, leaving his partner totally on edge. Explaining the rush, Elkin reports that all the mana up on the city's surface is mutating all at once. Connecting the dots, Simon figures out the villain just kicked off the massacre against the locals, and that the so-called trial was just the warm-up. A massive golden light bursts into the underground room, announcing the sudden arrival of the threat. The MC turns around in shock, finding the priest standing at the top of the stairs. Strolling down with a sick level of calm, the fanatic declares that this is a historic day for his order. Flexing pure sarcasm, he claims it's a massive honor to meet the King of Spirits in person on such an important date. Boiling with rage over the guy's nerve, the kid screams the religious leader's name as a threat. The legendary bird grumbles that he finally gets the anomaly he felt earlier, pointing out the disgusting smell of those things. The hallway floods with terrifying crystal beasts right behind the villain, making the spirit warn that things just went from bad to worse. The legion of living statues pushes forward without mercy, making guttural noises while taking up all the space. The outsider realizes in shock that those monsters are actually the innocent locals who got petrified. With uncontrollable rage, he screams, demanding to know what the fanatic did to those people. Keeping his holy act up, the priest casually replies that he simply opened the eyes of those who lacked magic. Staring at the monstrous beasts, the villain describes the tragedy as a beautiful rebirth, where inferior humans finally embrace true evolution. Holding out his hand one more time, Escott makes his final offer, asking the hero to join him and perfect his goddess's army. Rejecting the madness, the kid summons his green gale and tells the enemy to shut up, swearing to crush his plan right then and there. The religious leader just watches the kid's defiance with a look of pure coldness and disappointment. Without hesitating, he raises an arm and announces he has no other choice but to use force. Following their master's command, the monsters let out a fierce roar and charge straight at the prisoner. Feeling his body completely drained, Simon steps back, struggling to keep his energy up. He realizes in a panic that fighting this many enemies at once in his exhausted state is gonna be impossible. Faking surprise, the priest drops a sarcastic comment about how vulnerable his opponent looks. Suddenly, a powerful mystic attack hits the cave, but the villain realizes the shot aimed at the wrong spot. The crystal beasts pause their charge and look back, totally confused by the random distraction. Escott calmly explains that he'd never make the rookie mistake of turning the King of Spirits into a direct enemy. The stone creatures wait on standby, totally under the master's control. The fanatic keeps his twisted speech going, claiming the only ones who need to be wiped from history are regular people. He points out that inferior humans who haven't evolved into the crystal state yet are going to be thrown away without mercy. Looking down on the hero, the priest insists there's still time for him to change his mind and accept the team up. Totally ignoring the yap session, the mage boosts himself with a blast of wind and bolts out of there at top speed. Surprised by the bold getaway, the villain calls the outsider a lunatic while watching his target narrowly escape. Flying straight for the exit, Elkin warns they don't have time to deal with the priest right now. The bird warns that if they don't hurry up, the entire town is gonna get wiped out by the Stone Legion. The kid's magic boost smashes through the prison ceiling, clearing a path to the surface with a heavy crash. The scene cuts back to the church hallways, where Edward is running frantically trying to find the little girl. Popping out of her hiding spot, Enoch says she's right there, complaining that the big guy almost gave her a heart attack. The girl brags about being super helpful, joking that he should cut his commission fee after all this high-risk backup. Confused, the merc asks how she knew how to navigate such an isolated place, calling her move pure recklessness. With a mischievous smirk, the young girl replies she's actually walked these secret halls before. The merc is stunned that she knows her way around a dungeon, but the girl reminds him they're literally inside the church HQ. She explains that as a kid, she thought her mom's job was boring and preferred tagging along with her dad when he visited the order. Exploring the place bit by bit, she remembers the vibe used to be chill back then, letting her roam around freely. Giving a little giggle, the young girl admits she'd sneak into restricted areas just for the adventure, making her buddy call her a troublemaker. Showing off the glowing amulet, Enoch reveals the artifact was made by her own dad, who was a mage before he vanished. Putting the pieces together, Edward guesses the guy might also be locked up in here and asks her to guide them through the maze. Stubborn, the girl swears she's gonna save her parents with her own 2 hands and sheer willpower. But her bravery vanishes the second she spots her mom on the floor, sprinting over while the man tells her to chill. The warrior sweats cold, staring down the brand new monstrous threat that just popped up in their way. Shocked by the level of insanity, he wonders what kind of hell this place actually turned into. The crystal statue lets out a terrifying roar and gets ready for a ruthless attack. Moving fast, the warrior shoves the girl backward, getting them both out of the beast's fatal strike zone. Taking the opening, he uses his own armored arm to block the stone monster's heavy punch. The insane impact pulls a groan of pain from the merc, who feels the enemy's crushing brute force. Pushing the offense, the creature keeps its threatening stance, ready to obliterate anything in the priest's way. The crystal beast roars loudly, forcing its attack on the merc. With the heavy impact, the warrior gets pushed back, sliding across the stone floor. The monster ends up stepping back right after, letting out a clumsy grunt. Edward keeps a confident stance and jokes that the beast has a seriously hard head. Using the distraction, Enoch runs frantically toward her mom lying on the floor. The young girl hugs the woman tight, crying and begging her to wake up. The inn owner breathes with a lot of difficulty, showing she's still hanging on. Watching from a distance, the warrior feels relieved she's alive but notices the injuries are pretty bad. Keeping his eyes locked on the creature, he tells the girl to make a run for it with her mom while he holds the line here. The girl tenses up, knowing physical hits do nothing against the monster, wishing the mage was there to help. Right then, the injured older lady wakes up, coughing quietly in her daughter's arms. Filled with new determination, the girl calls out to the big guy. She sprints down the hallway saying she has a plan, and asking him to hold out just a little longer. The merc dodges a hit looking completely confused, asking what the heck she's scheming now. Running fast, Enoch figures the only way to beat that threat is by using a caster's power. The young girl keeps sprinting down the long dark hall, remembering the spot she's looking for is right around there. She finally finds her destination and stops in front of the place. The girl stares at the massive double doors, recognizing the entrance to the religious order's magic lab. Pushing the wood slowly, she prays she'll find something useful inside. But she immediately gets a huge jump scare when she notices movement in the dark room. Enoch ducks behind the door super fast, terrified of getting caught by whoever is in there. Taking a super careful peek, her eyes go wide at what she sees. A creepy monk is working surrounded by a weird aura, completely lost in the darkness of the lab. Meanwhile, the outside of the cathedral is looking incredibly heavy and chaotic under the moonlight. Locals are trying to hide in alleys, running from the nightmare that took over the streets. The scene is marked by people heavily injured and beaten down by the beast's attacks. Watching it all from above, the high priest shows a face of pure ecstasy, calling the tragedy a beautiful sight. The villain opens his arms to the ruined city, declaring the place has finally been reborn as holy ground. Out of nowhere, a giant green tornado rips through the air with insane violence. The massive wind magic hits one of the crystal monsters dead on, launching the creature far away. The storm keeps tearing through the hall, knocking down a bunch of stone threats all at once. The MC pops back up panting in the middle of the chaos, keeping a solid stance after the attack. Landing right behind him, the spirit bird warns that the extra effort is just gonna permanently wreck the mage's body. Arguing with his partner, the dark-haired hero swears there's still one last option left to fix this mess. The wind spirit stares at the kid, realizing how heavy the choice he's about to make actually is. The legendary bird shows obvious concern over his master's crazy plan. Standing in front of the destruction, the mage gets ready to act while the bird tries to question the move. Channeling a ridiculous amount of magic, Simon calls the spirit's true name and begs for all of his power. The story jumps back to the dark lab, revealing a terrifying figure strapped to a chair covered in tubes. Enoch goes into panic mode, thinking she found a dead body in the middle of that weird setup. Trying to keep her fear in check, the girl takes a deep breath and focuses on finding something useful to save the merc. Right then, a very specific detail in the corner of the room catches the young girl's eye. She turns her head, trying to get a better look through the room's low light. The girl's heart freezes when she recognizes who is sitting there. Completely shocked, she sees her own dad slumped over and chained to the church's equipment. The girl whispers in total disbelief, refusing to accept that her dad is in that condition. Looking at the heavy chains on his feet, she desperately asks herself why this is happening. The shock is so huge that the girl loses her balance and falls backward onto the lab floor. Dropped on the cold ground, Enoch shakes non-stop while trying to process the nightmare. The young girl's eyes are overflowing with absolute terror at the tragic discovery. Tears start welling up as she breathes heavily, totally spooked. At that moment, she notices a very familiar wooden box dropped right next to her. Back to the brawl in the hall, Edward uses all his agility to dodge the beast's charge. The monster punches the ground with brutal force, shattering the stone structure with a loud boom. The merc lands in a safe spot, keeping his guard up. Without letting up, the creature fires a concentrated beam of light straight at the warrior. The destructive blast hits the wall right behind him, sending rubble flying everywhere. Using the opening, the guy leaps in, charging up a punch packed with brute force. The crystal beast blocks the hit effortlessly, creating a massive shockwave in the air. From the clash, Edward gets knocked backward, but manages to plant his feet back on the stone floor. Holding his own bruised arm, the merc complains about the target's ridiculous defense, knowing he can't run and leave the woman behind. The monster's shadow creeps up looking dangerous, while the warrior regrets not having his weapon to handle the problem for good. Noticing Enoch running up, the man freaks out and yells for her to shut her eyes. A small object gets tossed through the air, flying right past the stone creature. Edward goes wide-eyed, totally confused by the kid's random move. He scolds her, calling the girl an idiot, reminding her that her mom is still right there. The mystery artifact hovers in the air and starts glowing insanely bright. A colossal explosion of blinding light fills the room, hitting the beast dead on. The warrior quickly throws his arms up to shield his eyes from the flash. Once the initial shock passes, he realizes nothing in the room actually blew up. Confused, the guy drops his guard and figures that thing definitely wasn't a bomb. The merc stares at the aftermath of the mystery light, looking completely surprised. With zero explanation, the crystal monster's bulky body just starts crumbling into dozens of pieces. Watching the threat melt away on its own, Edward asks out loud what the heck just happened. Standing right behind him looking super sad, Enoch reveals that her dad always knew the truth behind this trial and the real reason people were turning to stone. Holding the box of magic artifacts, Enoch explains her dad made that stuff specifically to try and stop the city's tragedy. The man left a written warning, admitting there was something super important he needed to say before they opened the box. He revealed, completely haunted, that the divine trial spreading through the streets was actually created by his own hands. The lab's original goal was to give magic to normal people, spreading the order's ideals perfectly. But as the research went on, the mage realized in panic that the results were spiraling completely out of his control. Desperate to fix the permanent mistake, he found out there was literally no way to stop the infection once it started. So the best he could do was create an item that could temporarily clear the magic in the area. Even though it couldn't cure anyone who had already turned, the item managed to stabilize the crystallization and calm the inn owner down. Watching the woman sigh in relief, the merc jokes that her wounds weren't as deep thanks to the anomaly itself. He then tells the girl to go hide with her mom, promising he'll handle the rest of the situation from here on out. But the young girl shoots down the protection offer immediately. With eyes full of resolve, she states her dad wanted to save those people and swears she's gonna finish what he started. The warrior gives a little smirk, recognizing the kid's genuine, impressive guts. He realizes right away that's the look of someone who isn't gonna change their mind for anything in the world. Helping her beat up mom onto the floor, the girl says she'll be right back. The woman watches her daughter sadly, while the dad's letter admits he only didn't follow the church's plans because of his family. The message ended with a desperate plea for them to stop the priest, as the duo rushes down the dark halls. Miles away, the King of Spirits' colossal summon tears through the sky, marking the first time the entity has ever popped up in the material world. The giant magic being asks if the kid actually grasps how insane this move is. The creature warns that the mage must have burned his own life force just to force that door to the spirit world open. And the warning gets even more serious, pointing out that the fallout from this extreme stunt is only just starting. Staring down his human partner, the ancient being asks if he's really ready to carry the massive burden of that power. The MC can barely breathe, panting under the crushing pressure of the magic. But even completely wiped out and running on fumes, the young guy looks up in the middle of the magic storm. Elkin notes that this is the look of someone who lost everything but crazily enough, still hasn't lost their inner spark. From the balcony of the main building, the high priest feels the massive vibe shift in the air and gets spooked by the raw power. He mutters the hero's fake name, having zero clue what the heck just happened. Staring at the insane windstorm blanketing the zone, the fanatic wonders how the kid managed to whip up a gale like that. The villain's logic said the prisoner shouldn't have a single drop of mana left in his wrecked body. But the shock quickly turns into a look of pure hatred over the plot twist. Annoyed by the situation, the religious leader claims he doesn't know what dirty trick the outsider used to hide that much energy. Speed walking across the balcony, he decides he needs to handle this new threat immediately. The priest orders his divine army to capture the invader without hesitating. Instantly, dozens of crystal beasts leap from all sides with brutal force to crush the solo target. But the young mage just stands there completely still and chill in the shadows, waiting for them to get close. With his eye glowing bright, he shows a terrifying level of coldness in the face of danger. In the blink of an eye, a massive wind explosion sweeps all the creatures away with extreme violence. The hero pops back up in the middle of a giant cyclone, shattering the stone monsters before they could even touch him. The villain's eyes bug out and he starts sweating, totally shook by how easily his army got swatted. Without losing the rhythm of the counterattack, the MC reaches out and aims all that concentrated fury. A devastating wave of green magic slams into the church building with zero mercy. The chunks of the cursed statues go flying through the air, completely turned to dust by the impact of the hit. Caught off guard by the shockwave, the priest himself gets blasted backward, screaming in agony. Sliding across the wrecked floor, he tries to figure out why the kid let himself get caught in a trap when he had this insane power locked away. Stepping out of the dust cloud, the mage pushes forward relentlessly, while the fanatic notices that this energy feels like it belongs to a king. It finally clicks for the high priest, realizing that kind of power doesn't belong to a normal human. A sick smile creeps across his face as he figures out the real source of everything. The villain guesses, totally amazed, that the kid simply borrowed the King of Spirits' power. The flashback of the hero begging for his partner's strength echoes in his mind. In that moment of pure desperation, the tiny spirit bird answered the call in the dark. The spirit warned that manifesting his true form in the material world would require using the kid's body as a vessel. The young guy agreed instantly, knowing that in his current state, his partner couldn't supply the mana needed naturally. The legendary creature harshly warned that a human body could never handle that much power, and it would literally cost him his life. The bird asked how far the mage was willing to crawl toward his own game over. With a sad, accepting smile, the hero confessed that his life was the only thing he had left to give. A heavy silence filled the room while the entity judged his master's absolute resolve. The kid's quiet crying showed all the pain of having no other way to save the innocent people. Sighing in frustration, the spirit roasted the human race, calling them all a bunch of foolish creatures. Snapping back to the chaotic present, the MC stumbles, feeling his vision start to blur dangerously. Feeling his body starting to shut down, he guesses he has maybe 1 or 2 minutes max before he completely passes out. Even with the clock ticking down fast, the outsider decides that's more than enough time to secure the win. He channels all his leftover spiritual energy into a gigantic glowing sphere. A devastating torrent of wind charges forward, wiping out the cathedral floor in a crushing attack. The young guy screams at the top of his lungs, announcing that the priest's psycho plan ends right here, right now. But the fanatic just smiles arrogantly, prepping his own golden magic and refusing to take the. He screams that the stone army is just paving the way for true salvation. The freaky petrification process keeps working on the locals in a super painful way. The villain warns that these pieces can be rebuilt as many times as it takes to hit the divine goal. Dozens of brand new crystal creatures start standing up from the fallen victims all over the city. Boiling with rage over the guy's ice-cold attitude, the hero curses the enemy and unleashes his destructive attack. However, the priest quickly throws up a massive golden barrier for protection. The shield holds up like a boss against the wind impact, while the leader admits his monsters are no match for spiritual authority. Flexing his confidence from behind the light, he sarcastically reminds the kid that his power is just borrowed and completely temporary. The mage grinds his teeth, pushing the magic to the absolute limit, while the enemy asks which one of them is gonna crack first. The two colossal spells clash, creating a giant explosion that shakes the entire foundation of the place. The furious wind keeps tearing through the hall, wrecking any crystal beasts that dare get close. Totally drained, the MC realizes that it doesn't matter how many monsters he drops. The horde just keeps getting bigger while his timer is running out. He finds himself facing a giant stone creature, raising its arms ready to flatten him in one hit. Watching it all with a superiority complex, the high priest flexes his confidence, positive the divine victory is already locked in. But the fanatic's cocky face suddenly turns into total confusion when he notices something is off. An intense blast of blinding light cuts through the dark room, pausing the chaos taking over the church. The giant beast freezes, completely lost on what just happened, letting the mage literally just stroll past it like it's nothing. A second later, the monster's massive structure just crumbles into pieces, leaving the religious leader in shock in the background. Furious at the scene, Escott screams desperately, demanding to know why his army just stopped attacking out of nowhere. Right then, heavy footsteps echo through the rubble, and the merc's voice praises the kid for doing some impressive damage to the place. The young outsider turns his head sweating cold, barely able to believe who just showed up. He sees Edward and little Enoch standing right behind him, feeling a massive wave of relief confirming they both made it out alive. Processing the interruption, the priest connects the dots and furiously figures out that Big Guy was the one who ruined his plans. Shaking with rage, the villain roasts the warrior, calling him a useless creature with 0 mana, demanding to know what dirty trick he used. Keeping up his usual snark, the man smiles and says the priest yaps way too much, suggesting he should be paying attention to something else right now. Pointing behind him, the merc advises the enemy to look over his own shoulder immediately. Like a literal ghost, the wind mage pops up glued to the priest's back with a sharp, ruthless glare. The religious leader freezes instantly, realizing he dropped his guard to the main threat. Giving 0 chance for defense, the kid fires off a devastating point-blank magic blast, while the villain screams his fake name. Getting swallowed by the raw power, Escott yells indignantly, asking why such a cracked caster chose to side with regular humans. He tries to play the history card, bringing up all the centuries of witch hunts and suffering that magic users went through. With absolutely 0 patience for this delusion, the MC just focuses his energy, ignoring the question of whether he wants to go back to that nightmare. A colossal green cyclone erupts from the floor, showing the insane power gap between the two. Taking the storm head-on, the fanatic completely loses control of the situation as his own magic breaks. The hero lets out a scream loaded with all his bottled-up frustration and rage, pushing the spell to its absolute breaking point. The whirlwind sweeps the zone with terrifying violence, shredding any defense the enemy tried to put up. Trapped in the middle of the tornado, the high priest gets launched brutally, screaming in agony as he takes the punishment he deserves. The crushing wind pressure obliterates the stone floor, blowing a massive crater into the holy hall. Totally defeated, the religious leader's body falls through the air down toward the rubble. Standing over the fallen guy, Simon coldly states that this whole bloodbath was never a noble crusade to free the mages. Staring at the villain's terrified face, the hero throws it back at him that this entire madness was just a straight-up massacre of innocent people. Silence hangs heavy in the wrecked hall, marking the official end of that fake prophet's threat. Safely away from the danger, Edward and the girl watch the win, totally blown away by the insane flex of power. But the mage's body finally hits its breaking point, collapsing helplessly toward the ground. The kid falls hard onto the stone floor, pooling blood as he completely blacks out. The scene cuts to a thick forest right outside the city, where the vibe is still incredibly dark. One of the stray crystal monsters is seen standing, having just taken down a massive bear in the woods. The stone beast suddenly snaps its grotesque head, noticing a new prey creeping up quietly. The monster raises its sharp arm and charges full speed at a mystery guy in a cape who just showed up. In a lightning-fast, almost invisible move, the newcomer's sword flashes, slicing through the night air. The cursed creature gets sliced clean in half with terrifying ease, dropping dead in a split second. Inspecting the beast's remains, the swordsman recognizes the magic and confirms it's one of the crystal constructs from the priest's research. Showing 0 empathy for his supposed ally, the hooded guy mutters he couldn't care less about what happens to that fanatic. Strolling slowly toward the gates of the ruined city, he decides he's gonna check for himself if his partner's life is still useful at all. Pulling back his hood to show his face, Captain Klein Heist steps up looking menacing, proving the real boss fight just arrived. Inside a stressful nightmare, the mage's voice echoes, demanding the captain stop right now. The villain's dark outline replies coldly, calling the kid's obsession with revenge totally pathetic. Stepping on a broken crystal hand, Klein cruelly asks what gives the kid the right to even try to get payback on him. The young outsider sweats cold in the dream, feeling the crushing weight of those ruthless words. His brain gets haunted by the reveal that every single crystal monster destroyed in the battle was actually a living person. The guilt eats him alive, while petrified hands seem to point at him, calling him a murderer. The hero jolts awake, screaming in a panic and breathing heavy, wrapped in bandages on a bed. Spooked by the random yell, Edward and little Enoch look at the kid, super relieved to see he finally opened his eyes. Crying happy tears, the girl runs and tackles the mage on the bed, calling him by the fake name he used. Hugging her savior tight, she vents that she thought the worst happened and feels bad she didn't get to say a proper thank you. The merc steps in instantly, pulling the girl back by her collar and telling her to give him some space, since his body is still super wrecked. Done crying, the kid's mood flips when she realizes he must be starving, and she runs off to make some soup. Putting his hands on his hips, the big guy walks up and asks if his buddy is feeling better, dropping the bomb that he was knocked out for a whole week. He chills the kid out, saying the inn is back to normal, and the girl's mom is still resting up to get back to 100%. Looking at the bandages on his own body, Simon processes everything and is amazed he actually survived that absolute madness. Trying to feel his magic connection, the young guy gets worried when he realizes the King of Spirits isn't answering his calls. Pushing that aside for a sec, he grabs the warrior's arm and desperately asks if the priest managed to get away. Patting the kid's chest to calm him down, Edward promises they toss the fanatic straight into his own underground dungeon. The merc explains the locals wanted to end the villain right there, but decided to keep him breathing to try and find a cure for the crystals. Hearing the situation is handled brings a massive wave of relief to the mage, who processes the news in dead silence. Even feeling weak, he tries to get out of bed and says he needs to see the religious leader ASAP. The big guy tries to stop him, saying his body can't take it, but the kid insists he still has some super important questions to ask. A little bit later, the squad walks together through the ruined city streets under a cloudy, depressing sky. Checking out the wrecked scenery, Simon comments looking down that the property damage was way worse than he thought. Laughing out loud, the warrior tells him to chill, claiming that losing a few houses is a cheap price to pay compared to losing lives. But the guilt trip keeps haunting the outsider, who feels like this entire mess happened because he got involved. Suddenly, the kid stops walking and goes wide-eyed, noticing a crowd of locals grouped up right in front of him. One of the citizens points a finger straight at him, telling the others that he's the outsider responsible for the magic in the plaza. The guy walks up looking serious, getting the hero's attention and saying they need to have a very serious chat with him. Instantly, the trauma floods back into the kid's brain, fully expecting to get called a murderer for hurting the transformed innocents. The trauma hits the mage hard, making him sweat cold, terrified he's gonna get bullied for hurting the crystal locals. But reality flips the script when the guy firmly grabs the young guy's hands and genuinely thanks him for saving everyone. Completely relieved, the citizen says if it wasn't for the hero's guts, they never would have been able to stop Escott's crazy plan. The MC is left speechless and stutters an apology, while the merc and the girl watch the whole thing from a distance. Right then, the local calmly explains they aren't dumb enough to believe in some convenient miracle, where magic rocks just turn back into humans. Understanding the heavy situation, the guy states the mage simply freed the victims from that horrific suffering and made sure the rest of the city survived. Hearing those honest words lifts a massive weight off the kid's back, letting him finally breathe in peace. With a soft voice, the hero gives a super genuine thank you for the understanding from people who lost so much. Watching the happy ending, Edward flashes a proud smile while little Enoch also looks absolutely hyped. The girl excitedly points out she already told them everything would turn out fine in the end. Joking around, she roasts the warrior, calling him a meathead for saying the exact same thing earlier. Suddenly, the big guy's chill face drops when he notices some sketchy movement in the area. The young outsider also clocks the immediate danger, locking his eyes on a super heavy presence nearby. Confused by the sudden vibe shift, the girl calls the mage by his fake name, not getting what's going on. Walking straight past the girl with a serious face, the MC tells her absolutely do not go anywhere near that zone. Creeped out by the sudden tension, Enoch asks what got into them to make them so spooked out of nowhere. Staring at the dark doors of the cathedral, the hero has a gut feeling the nightmare in the city isn't totally over yet. Right behind him, the merc backs up the theory, warning there's definitely someone else dangerous creeping around the place. Without wasting a second, the warrior sprints ahead through the ruined halls, telling his buddy to hold up a sec. But the kid quickly figures out the invader's target has to be the locked-up priest, suspecting a heavy tie to climb. Driven by that theory, the MC runs down the dark stairs, terrified of bumping into the literal executioner from his past. Reaching the underground dungeon, his eyes bug out when he walks in on a completely unexpected scene. An insanely fast and violent sword strikes slices through the dark air straight at the two intruders. Running on pure instinct, Edward shoves the mage out of the way and they both narrowly dodge the lethal hit by a hair. Catching his balance, the warrior stares into the shadows, while a mystery voice sounds surprised that there are actually survivors left down there. The sketchy guy recognizes the outsider and calls him by his real name in the middle of the dark. Hearing that voice from the past makes the MC freeze on the spot, getting hit with a massive chill. Gritting his teeth with pure hatred, the young guy glares at the attacker and realizes exactly who he's dealing with. The intimidating figure of Latin Heist steps up glowing with a red aura, holding a sharp blade after stirring up chaos in the room. Confused by the tense standoff, the merc asks if his buddy happens to know this dangerous dude. Without taking his eyes off the enemy, the kid coldly replies that he knows this guy very well. The opponent strolls casually through the shadows, while the hero reveals that Latin actually used to be his older brother back in the day. Flashing a totally psycho smile, the villain roasts his little brother's haircut and says it's wild he even survived that old attack. Boiling with rage, Simon listens to his brother mockingly say that, after so many lives were wasted trying to protect a useless kid, making it out alive was the absolute bare minimum he expected.